Ah, that's so sweet. Uh, well, we'll see what well, there's Elizabeth. We'll see what people have to say. I have a question. This is a Zoom question for either of you. My Zoom thing looks a certain way when I do the seeing as many people as possible. But I understand that others looks different. Do we know why?
Be more specific. How does it look one way versus
Okay,
the
for instance, I always set mine to the setting where you see, in this case, looks like 25 people. And for reasons that are unclear to me, I am on the top row, second from the left. And Elizabeth has disappeared. Oh no, Elizabeth is now at the right-hand end of the third row, for instance.
Well,
Is,
I think it's something to do uh, with it where you are. You always show up because I'm always on the first row, and I'm on the first row right now on
Yeah,
my
so
screen.
you always see yourself up at the top, unless you actively turn that off.
So,
oh, okay.
that's probably why you do too, because
Yes. All right. Well, thank you.
I don't set it. I'm not smart enough to set it to do that way. So
Neither am I. Oh, there's Ed. Ed's here.
I'm
Or
here.
is
Did I miss something? Did we miss something?
no, we're just talking, we're just basically talking to each other.
Oh.
Ed, Elizabeth and I have elected you to greet our customers and
Okay.
to ask Kevin to go through the protocols, and then I will introduce Dr. Baker, and I will uh, handle those questions and then hand it off to Elizabeth for item 2.
Sounds like a great plan to me. That sounds terrific.
And you can do new business, old business if anyone is still alive.
Sounds good to me. That sounds
Okay.
great. All right. All good. When we move.
it's 6:31. But how many customers do we have here?
How many folks do we have?
145?
145.
How many? 25? We expect
145.
145. I think we have enough people here. If everyone will bear with me for one more second, let me just get some paper in front of me so I can take minutes while the meeting is going on, and we will get this started. All right. Okay, I guess we're ready to go.
We want to wait a couple minutes so more people can enter. What do you think, Will?
Sure.
Kevin?
What do you all think?
Yeah, people are coming in at a very fast
Are they?
pace.
Okay, so
we
let's
just at 140, we have 166 now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
You want to wait
we
till
give it
6:35?
2 minutes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, good. Then let me queue up some clean paper then.
Thank goodness we aren't meeting in a meeting room.
Wow, I was gonna say we really I can't remember the last time housing had a big meeting. We had a big meeting though when we did a joint meeting. I don't know if you all remember, we were over at what's the
Isaac's.
school on 84th? Chapin? Is it Chapin on 84th? And
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We had like 300 people. Gary Barnett was there from Extel. We were talking about the site over on 79th.
That's right.
Remember? Room was packed.
That was a good meeting.
It was a lot of people, a lot of folks, and I guess even though I like being in person, this makes it easier for everyone to participate. So I can't complain
Yes.
about that.
Okay, 185.
Wow. That's quite a lot.
I
Is
think
it,
they're all
Kevin,
for
we have some sort of
section,
giveaway?
Anthony.
Is there some sort of giveaway associated with this? Like
No.
or a raffle? Wow.
Ed Hartzog will take you out for lunch. That's the giveaway.
Yes,
Exactly. Exactly. That's right. We'll take you out to lunch. Exactly. Thank you. There
the
you go.
1
There you
millionth
go. That's it.
customer.
That's it. Your choice of restaurants in community district 8.
197.
Wow.
Yeah, we're getting up there.
Should we wait for 200 and then start, or what do you want to do? What do you want to do?
Well, one more minute.
Okay, fair enough. Well, we're
Yeah.
at 201. Wow. Okay. I'm glad I'm doing the intro.
I think Will said earlier that 200 people had signed up for item 1 when we were talking earlier.
I was going to say before we record this, Kevin, I usually while we do this, I try to go through the participant list while the meeting is going on for attendance, but I'm just going to full disclosure, I'm just going to cave right now and give up. I'm just going to try to record community board members because at 200 I don't think I could get it all down.
Yeah, just for
I
the
won't
minutes,
worry
we're
about
going to
it.
need
Yeah.
the board members.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. You want to get started?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Okay.
let's.
All right. Okay. Well, welcome everyone to the November meeting of the Zoning Development and Housing Committee. My name is Ed Hartzog. I am one of the co-chairs, along with my other co-chair, Anthony Cohn and Elizabeth Ashby. We're happy that you all are here, all 200 plus strong of you. We are thrilled that you're here. We have a full agenda. So if you've been with us before, you know the rules and how we do things. But if this is your first time, Kevin from our district staff will be here to give you the rundown on how things go in terms of participating and having your questions answered and addressed. So, Kevin, I will turn it over to you to
All
give
right.
everybody the lay of the land.
Welcome, everyone. If this is your first time joining us virtually, you will notice that you are currently muted, and everyone will remain muted throughout the meeting except for the committee co-chairs, Ed, Elizabeth, and Anthony, and any presenters as we move through the agenda. As we move through the agenda, the co-chairs will call on members of the public wishing to speak. You can participate by going to the React icon on your device and pressing the raise hand button, not the wave or thumbs up, as those will disappear. Only press it once. If you press it a second time, your hand will go back down. If you are calling in on the phone, it is *9 to raise hand and *6 to unmute. Be on the lookout for a prompt asking you to confirm unmuting once the co-chairs call on you. The chat is available for technical support only to help with Zoom software problems, not to ask questions of the co-chairs. They will not see the chats. If you're using an older version of Zoom, you will need to go to the participant section where you will find the raise hand feature there. Please do not raise your actual hand or wave at the screen because we may not be able to see you. Chat me, I'm here for support. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Really appreciate it. So, folks, welcome. I'm going to turn it over to my co-chair, Anthony Cohn, at this point to take it away for item number 1.
Okay, thank you, Ed. Thank you to all 200 and some odd, 238 people as 39 who are here at this meeting. Now, I would like to introduce Dr. Daniel Baker from Lenox Hill Hospital, who will speak to us. This is, but before I do, this is a very general presentation without any slides. They are Lenox Hill Hospital and its design team are going to be coming before this committee again in the January meeting, which I think somebody said was January 28th, at which time they will make a full presentation and be better equipped in terms of preparedness on their part to actually answer questions about what they're doing, specifically what they're doing or what they're proposing. So, and if we do not get to you in the question period, which will be curtailed because we have another agenda item, there is, and will put this up in the chat, or Kevin will put this up in the chat. They have an email address for questions. You can also send questions to the district office. The email is renewinglennox@northwell.edu. I think it was edu. But I think that Dr. Baker can correct that if I'm wrong. So I see he's here. I see his mic is on. So Dr. Baker.
Thank you, Anthony. And you are correct on that email. Thank you to everybody for joining tonight, and thank you for having us at the Community Board 8 meeting. My name is Daniel Baker. I am the president of Lenox Hill Hospital, and I am an emergency physician. I've had the pleasure of being at Lenox Hill for the past 17 years, and I'm very proud of the institution that we have and the community that we serve on the Upper East Side. We're here tonight after meeting with leadership of Community Board 8 to provide a brief update of where our project stands and some of the next steps in our process. We've been very grateful to Valerie Mason for her time as well as her guidance with this process. And I need to start tonight by tempering some expectations. I know that many of you have multiple questions that you're hoping to have answered tonight, but unfortunately that is not the purpose of our appearance this evening. I've seen the flyers around the hospital and throughout the community, and I appreciate the community's excitement to hear more about the project. It's a very impactful project, and so I understand why there are many, many voices that would like to ask questions. We plan to be back, as Anthony said, at the January meeting in late January, and at that time we'll have the opportunity to answer many of the questions, and we'll certainly spend a good amount of time listening to those questions and answering as best we can. This evening, as Anthony's already said, we have an email for you, renewinglennox@northwell.edu. You are certainly able to use that to send to us any of the questions that you might have, and anything that that's on your mind. We're happy to answer that in a timely manner as well. So again, I really appreciate the opportunity just to give a brief update of where we stand. So since the last time we spoke, we've continued working on our final proposal, which we're expecting to have done imminently. We've been incorporating feedback of the multiple community voices and have continued to meet with many of our elected officials as well as community groups from the Upper East Side and across New York City at large. We've been spending time reflecting on the previous feedback that you have all provided and asking what might we make possible within that feedback to come and present to you in January. While we're not presenting new information tonight, we wanted to recap what has happened so far and move into a bit of next steps. The development of this project has had a long timeline, and so it's important to remember some key factors on the journey, including the interruption caused by the global pandemic in 2020 and 21. We first presented to Community Board 8 in March of 2019. Shortly after, we introduced a series of task force meetings with Councilmember Keith Powers and then Borough President Gail Brewer. This task force meeting series was very similar to what you recently experienced with MSK's proposal. The meetings were productive, and most importantly, those meetings had a direct impact in the design and construction of our proposal and our building. They changed multiple aspects of the project, including the height, which has continued to come up as a concern of the community. We also held multiple community engagement forums and feedback sessions where, again, we listened and made further changes. We know you support Lenox Hill Hospital and our mission and are very appreciative of that. And we equally understand you have concerns about the proposal's height and duration of construction. After the interruption of COVID-19, we introduced the project we reintroduced the project with a much changed proposal and decreased height, and spent a lot of time, again, going to our different community partners, our elected officials, and again, to Community Board 8 to showcase those changes. Following our scoping hearing in 2023, we focused on developing our land use application and environmental impact statement with the Department of City Planning. We've been exploring every option to further respond to your concerns, which has required multiple conversations with the Department of City Planning. Those conversations have been productive and are leading us to our final proposal and really where we are today. Again, I understand that you're looking for more details and you have many questions. And again, tonight will not be the night for those details. We are looking forward to coming back in January as we finalize our process. And I apologize not being able to answer the specifics this evening. We're again anticipating that the January 28th meeting of the Community Board will offer much more detailed information where we can answer and spend a lot of time hearing your feedback and your questions and concerns. We're committed to keeping you updated, and that's why we're returning early outside of the ULURP process. Our plan is to expect certification within Q1 of 2025, and then we will enter in the ULURP process and all the different component pieces, including the discussions that will be ongoing with Community Board 8 during that process. In the meantime, you can reach out and submit any questions again to the email that we provided. That's renewinglennox@northwell.edu, so that we can address them equally in future discussions. I'm very much looking forward to coming back and sharing more information when we have the opportunity to do so. And again, I thank you for your time this evening.
Okay, thank you. I guess we will spend a couple of minutes letting some people queue up.
Just a reminder, if you have any questions, please raise your virtual hand. Thank you. Anthony,
Starting with, go ahead.
First up is Al.
Yes. Okay, and we're going to start with members of the public. And so, Al Hurley, you appear to be first up.
Hi, Dr. Baker, thank you for your presentation. Let me just say that if the proposal is anywhere close in any manner to the atrocious proposal that was presented before and does not stay within the envelope that Lenox Hill Hospital is today, you will face very significant opposition from many parties. And I think it's absolutely inappropriate in what we would call bedpan alley, Liz Krieger's world, to do anything more than to renovate the hospital. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That was fortunately brief. We need to, it's very important that everyone be as concise as possible so we can get a good number of you in. Vanessa Aronson.
Hi, thanks so much for coming, I'll say. Since you aren't able to give us any update on the actual plan of the project, can you give us an update in terms of the timing? You shared the timing of when you propose to go through ULURP, but what will you be proposing through the ULURP for how long the project will actually take?
Certainly, I understand the concern and the desire on that question. We're planning on speaking to that in our January meeting when we can really flesh out all the details of the proposal. So this evening, unfortunately, the answer is that we're not prepared to talk about that timing, understanding the concern that you have raised as has the community. Equally, we are committed to making this project as fast as we can, as we understand the importance both to our patients, our community, and to the neighborhood.
Thank you. All right. Lois Utley appears to be next.
Comment.
Ah, there we are.
Can you hear me?
Not very well.
No.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Yes, okay. It makes sense to me that Northwell wants to renovate Lenox Hill Hospital. It is dilapidated. But what doesn't make sense is investing this kind of money in a huge hospital expansion project in a place that already has far more hospital capacity than it needs. The Upper East Side has more than 10 hospital beds per 1,000 people. That's 4 times the citywide rate. I want to urge you to consider scaling back the ambitiousness of this project as you're going into the final design phases. And then investing some of your dollars that you wouldn't be spending on this giant tower in the Upper East Side, spend those dollars in adding hospital capacity in places across our city that have too few hospital beds. Places like Queens that has only 1.6 hospital beds per 1,000 compared to Upper East Side, 10 beds. Places like Brooklyn, only 2 hospital beds per 1,000. Places like the Lower East Side, which is losing Beth Israel Medical Center. So I hope you'll consider that. As an advocate for health equity, I'm sure that Northwell believes in health equity, and I'd like to urge you to put your money where your beliefs are. Thank you.
Thank you. It's also, thank you, Lois. I think that you should also not just identify yourself, but also give us a hint as to where you live. We have Ben, then it appears we have Erica Burson and Ed Samick next.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Ben Wetzler. I previously lived right near Lenox Hill. A couple years ago, I moved down to Stuyvesant Town, which is right across the street from Beth Israel. So I definitely echo a lot of what Lois was saying about the importance of neighborhood equity in terms of the amount of where hospitals are being built versus shut down. My question that I wanted to ask is, in the previous iteration of the project, the uh, timeline was part of the reason that there was such a significant timeline for the construction that was going to happen was because you were resistant to shutting down any services at the hospital during the construction period, so you couldn't do a kind of phased approach to it, which might have been a little bit been faster and required less staging. Is that still the plan? You want to kind of uh, drag it out because you don't want to shut down any of the services that you're offering? And have you studied, potentially faster options by just, closing down a wing for a year or two?
So thank you for the question. We don't intend to drag anything out, first and foremost. Secondly, we are fully committed to our patients and the community we serve by remaining fully operational during this process. It is simply incongruent with our mission and not possible with the nature of the project to shut the hospital down.
Okay, thank you for the question and the answer. Everyone make sure you're not asking the same question somebody else just asked or asked slightly previously. Erica.
Hi, my name is Erica Burson, and I live on 71st between 1st and 2nd. So you could say I live in the heart and soul of Hospital Central here. I've also spent 30 years working in strategic communications for healthcare institutions, similar to and a competitor of Lenox Hill Hospital. And I have to tell you, as somebody who has led communications for major global pharmaceutical companies, it is absolutely beyond the pale that you did not show up here prepared beyond just to say we can't.
Erica,
No,
Erica, no. If that's all your question
no,
is,
it's not. It's
well,
not.
then ask your question, please.
So the issue here is why you think you need to do this in a community that has more hospital beds and more healthcare services than any other place in the country, other than to be a competitor. We don't want it. That's why there's so many people on this call. Thank you.
So I appreciate your question. We are committed to the permanence of Lenox Hill and the Upper East Side, as we have been for the last 160 years. We are part of this. We are part of the healthcare that has been foundational to the city of New York and the Upper East Side. And we're committed to existing in that fashion.
Thank you. Okay, we've got, let's see, we're doing okay. I'm going to skip a few people. I will try and get back to you. Stephanie Reckler.
I would like to identify myself, Dr. Baker. I am a true Upper East Sider. I have lived within a 10-block radius of where I grew up. My mother was on the auxiliary in the 1950s. I'm a dinosaur, but I'm leading a grassroots campaign to save Lenox Hill Hospital for the community. My children grew up here. My husband is actually on the staff of Weill Cornell Medical School. He has met your doctors at the hospital. He has even practiced slightly in your operating rooms. You have wonderful doctors. They deserve a good space. And it is a dilapidated hospital now. We don't question that you want to renovate your hospital. We want it renovated for our community. But the hospital has always been a community hospital. It has served us well. And you need to look us in the eye as you should do your patients. And you should hear us, not just dismiss us as a multi healthcare operation. What is interesting is the support that we have. We put up posters on Monday morning. Not only one poster was torn down. The comments on the posters, I've taken pictures of the comments. You should listen to the community. That's what we want. And that's all I have to say. Listen to us. Look us in the eye. Don't communicate by email. That's not how you treat. That's not how you should treat your patients. Treat us like individuals, not like laptops who sign on to a Zoom. We want to meet you in person. So
okay. Thank you, Stephanie. There wasn't a question buried in there. Please
Just real
do.
quick, Anthony. Stephanie, we have met actually multiple times, and that is exactly due to the fact that we do look at our communities as a necessary part of the voices and the importance of what we're trying to do. And so I would hope that those meetings had some value and some meaning to you in that fashion, as they will in the future. And that is why we will be back in January, to make certain that we're able to answer questions that are not just by email. So thank you.
Okay, remember, even if it's a statement in the form of a question, Ed Samick next. No, you're still muted. Still muted. Unmute yourself. So there you go.
Very much. Yeah, I was thanking both you and the doctor for showing up for this program. I live at 863 Park Avenue, which exits on 77th Street directly opposite the hospital. And I've known the hospital for a very long time. I know patients who are a client of mine, and I'm a businessman. I've run a bunch of companies doing many in healthcare and so forth. But my concern is really a narrow one, which is, are you considering, and what are you doing, if anything, to deal with the problem with what I call the street traffic? Because if I looked at you, if I had your job, I'd worry about my responsibility to my shareholders, which is financial, but I'd also worry about my responsibility of my patients and my providers, meaning the doctors. And when I look out on the street here, we are basically many times for long periods of a parking lot of cars stuck, of ambulances stuck, patients being taken out in the rain and the snow, ambulances parking up on Park Avenue. And it would seem to me that if I had any responsibility for this project, I would say one of the things I need to do is clear that street so that my patients can get in and get good health care and good outcomes. And the same thing for the doctors. And I would have possibly the whole ground level or below a parking area. So I guess the question is, what, if anything, are you doing? Do you think about this? Do you care about it? And what's happening?
Yeah, thank you for your question. I agree with you, as does the rest of the team, in the importance of remedying the streetscape and making it safer, making it more patient-friendly, making it friendly to the clinicians and the team members who use this building every day, and more importantly, a better experience for the community on the Upper East Side. So I completely and wholeheartedly agree with your statement and question.
Are you doing something? Will there be additional parking in the building?
We don't know yet. Thank you, Ed. That was 2 questions, one more than anyone's allowed. Okay, we've got Anne Goodbody. Sean G appears to just be, who was ahead of her in the queue, appears to be just an icon for a camera. So we'll skip him for a moment and go to Anne.
Yes, I think my question probably revolves around what everybody else is saying, which is, who exactly is this hospital for, with very large luxury, what appears to us luxury, single occupancy rooms? How are you going to, or what would the costs of this facility be? What are you going to have to charge relative to other hospitals in the area, given this is such an expensive facility? And why are you so unwilling to invest in Lenox Hill to bring it up to a standard within its current envelope, or maybe with a little bit more, and build a large hospital elsewhere where it's needed? So we're all saying the same thing, and we do not understand why you continue to barrel ahead with something that is this large, something so massive, where it is not needed and is going to be very expensive.
Understood.
Thank you. Perfect answer. All right,
Anthony,
I've got.
maybe we should go to Sean. Sean said his camera's not working, but he's there.
Oh, okay. Let's go to Sean.
Hi there. Yeah, I was just had a comment to follow up on who was Ed's comment there. Yeah, 77th is just an absolute nightmare, and the proposed design as is just untenable for the area. And I mean, it's already, Lexington's 1 lane, 77th is shut down half the time because you've got stagnant ambulances. When you have active ones, they can't even get to the hospital. I brought this point up when you guys were trying to push through the initial monster of a plan that was just a hideous beast. That was when you were trying to do the apartments on the west side along Park, which got shot down. There was there was apparently enough for Lenox to listen to the opposition from Park Avenue residents for pulling that portion down, but not tripling the
This is
what is there.
moving. This is moving away from a question, Sean.
Oh well, yeah, but it was one of
understand-
those things that was never answered before. It was why has there not been any consideration into incorporating a pass through? And I mean, it was told before that it was because you wanted to maintain the western portion operational, but there's, no matter what, it should have been an initial concept of design to have a pass through from north to south.
Yes, we understand. I mean, everybody understands that.
Yeah, but there's been no
Baker,
response to it. That's all.
Expect a response, whether you like it or not, in January. Think of this as a teaser for January.
Oh, yeah.
Oliver, well, I don't, you can like it or not. Oliver Goldstein. Please make this a
Thank you.
question.
Yeah, it is a question. So you had mentioned that the new proposal is going to be responsive to the concerns about both building height and about the duration of the project. And since you said that it's going to be lower and shorter, I assume that means you have a number. And I was wondering if you could share, either of those numbers with us, since we, if it's shorter, then you must know what the number is.
No, he probably doesn't, but go ahead.
Right. So to be fair, I didn't actually say the new proposal would be any of those things. But along the same lines, what I was trying to articulate is that we're attempting to incorporate, again, the feedback of the community into the different aspects of the design. The specifics of the questions that you have, I understand, and certainly we'll have more answers in January that will be far more specific and be able to answer what you're asking.
Okay. I am now going, because I can, I am now going to stop the line of public comments with people who already have their hands up, which would end with Gary Beller. Sorry, Alan. Committee members who wish to ask a question, a brief question, can do so. Okay. We'll start with, people can drop out. That's okay with me. Oh, good. I'm getting confused now. All right. It appears that everyone but Gary, no, he's dropped out. Okay. We're going to start over. We're going to just start with community board members. Please, brief questions. Michelle, you're first up.
Yes, I will make a statement and then a question. I found this with an attendance of at one point about 268 people at one point. Delighted that they're here. I hope that they will come back in January. However, I have to say that is a lot to ask, but I hope they will. And my question is this: can you please list for me, Dr. Baker, the questions that you will be answering in January?
No.
Well,
I can't anticipate the questions that are going to be proposed
all
in
right.
January.
Then, with all due respect to the co-chairs,
I appreciate
Michelle.
that.
No, okay. Okay. That was my question. You answered me. With all due respect to everybody involved, I don't know why this meeting was scheduled, but I'm delighted that you're all here, and I hope I see you all again in January. I wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving and a wonderful holiday season.
Thank you, and equally to you.
Okay. Sorry, Dr. Baker. Okay, I would like to say something now. And what I would like to say is that the reason we had this meeting tonight, knowing that the Lenox Hills plans for the hospital are incomplete and not ready to show us, was for them to express their willingness to continue a dialogue with the community. And whether you believe it or not, that's fine. But the point of all of this is that this is the beginning. Let's pretend for a moment that Lenox Hill has never done anything, and we're starting afresh. So let's look at this in that spirit, that this is a hello, and that we will get from Lenox Hill something substantive in January to which all 265 of us will be able to respond. And I think that's the only fair way to look at this. Marco, you're chuckling, and you're next. And I think we're,
thank you.
Let's see, how do we have?
Thank you, Anthony. Hello, Dr. Baker. The question that I have is, do you have the environmental report ready? And are you willing to show us before the meetings? And in that environmental report, do you study the traffic in the area? This is my two questions, Dr. Baker.
So yes, we do study the traffic in the area as required by the Department of City Planning and the Environmental Impact Study. And we do not have the report to share for you this evening. We will have it when it is official with the Euler process.
There is no chance to see it before because it's gonna be too late. I'm sorry to insist. And thank you. I don't want to take more of your time, but please, thank you.
Thank you, Marco. I think one of the things that is frustrating for all of us on our side of the Euler table is that we get things that are effectively complete, and we don't really have the opportunity to question the veracity of the particularly traffic reports for reasons that are unclear to me. But that seems to be a sticking point in general. Okay, Sharon, Pope Marshall.
Thank you, Dr. Baker, and welcome. I also wanted to thank Valerie as well as Anthony, Ed, and Elizabeth for facilitating this meeting. I really am a little bit confused, and Michelle certainly, I think, amplified for me some of my uneasiness about the meeting overall. And Anthony, I appreciated your clarification that this meeting was intended to be a teaser, if you will. But we had that teaser back in 2023. And so I'm asking myself again that question, even after your explanation, what are we doing here this evening? Because at this juncture, I see this working out really well for Lenox Hill Hospital with respect to this meeting. Certainly, they will be able to list it as a meeting that they had with the community. But although this is a Zoom meeting, I feel the frustration. And, you know, I guess I'm hoping that we'll have a solid plan in January, that it will be distributed to the community early in January. But I just wanted to share some feelings that I think that Michelle put in some context as to the rationale for the meeting this evening, since we're not receiving any information that the community could understand, could accept overall, and opine on it in an informed manner.
You don't have to say anything. That was felt more like a statement.
Listen, it was a statement, Anthony. What I'll answer is we met with leadership of Community Board 8, and the reason that we came here, I was very clear that we did not have updates, and was very clear that we wouldn't be able to answer questions, and that's a very frustrating situation on both parties. It's frustrating for me to not be able to answer your questions this evening equally as it is frustrating for you to not have them answered. That was part of my hesitancy in wanting to come, to be very candid. But the commitment to listening to the community and the commitment of providing updates, even when the updates are that we will be here later to make certain that we have the ability to show you our finalized proposal, is an important step in the process, and an important step of, again, showing the importance of this community board to our process.
Thank you. Alita?
Hi, thank you, Anthony, and thank you for that very limited presentation. Is that an emergency that you're doing on your phone right now? Because it seems that you're not really paying attention. It didn't seem you were paying attention to Sharon either. I was a member of that task force because I was chair of the community board at the time that the task force was convened. And right from the very beginning, there was a lack of interest in the community board's involvement. So I would like to know, my understanding is that doctors take an oath, a Hippocratic oath to do no harm. So I would like to know how you personally and the other doctors at Lenox Hill, whether administrators or faculty at Northwell or members of the staff, reconcile the do no harm with a great harm to the community as evidenced by the community's lack of enthusiasm and outright opposition to this project, the harm that you're doing by not building a hospital in another community, the harm that you're doing by not giving the community board, who is involved in the ULURP process, the opportunity to address not only your plans, but the environmental impact statement before ULURP actually kicks off. To me, and my just question is, how does the hospital justify the lack of respect to the community in not involving it at all? I'm sorry if we're keeping you. That when you first had, not you, but Jill was there and some other administrators from the hospital, when you had your first presentation with posters and food somewhere at Lenox Hill, and the community board was not invited, to a lack of responsiveness at the task force and a lack of meeting with the community boards. I don't really and it's part and parcel actually of the way that Lenox Hill has treated the public, such as keeping more trucks parked on 77th Street without notifying the community during the pandemic. So my question is really, how do you reconcile the do no harm with everything? And I'll have more information on another very critical part of the hospital's actual, not the construction process, but the construction of the hospital itself and public health in January. I'm just waiting for information from an engineer. So that's my question. Thank you. I don't mean to sound disrespectful, but there is just been a great.
I'm sorry, but unfortunately, I will say that you do, and I will not have the oath that is sacred to me for the schooling and the countless hours and time that I have put into the care of patients that I do as a physician be questioned in this nature. That is not tenable to a productive process, and I simply will not hear that. It's offensive to me, and you need to understand that. I certainly understand the frustration that you have, and that can come out in the way that you're answering or asking the questions, but I will not have my integrity questioned with regard to my nature as a physician. Certainly, there will be more to come.
Thank you. Okay, Valerie.
Thank you, Anthony, for unmuting me. I just want to say a couple of things. Northwell Hospital is here tonight at our invitation in response, essentially, to repeated emails that I have received as chair of Community Board 8 from the community asking, what is happening? We haven't heard anything in a long time. I have been trying to downplay the information that was going to be imparted here this evening because I can't control what other people are circulating and expecting. But I think if you had attended any of our full board meetings or any of the lead up to this, you would have come away with the message that this was an introduction to what will be coming in the future. That Northwell came here, I think, in a show of good faith as a starting over. Anthony mentioned this at the beginning of the meeting this evening, that this was to start a dialogue, not finish anything, not to have this be an indictment of the hospital. I think, to be honest with you, I'm stunned by people personally attacking Dr. Baker, and I apologize for that, Dr. Baker. It's disrespectful and not something that this community board is used to, just not part of our DNA, so I apologize for that. I did not invite this doctor here this evening to be personally attacked in any way, shape, or form, and I apologize for that. I have to say it again. The community wants to have a dialogue, and in order to have a meaningful dialogue, we have to respect one another. I think that if you are against this project, nothing you hear tonight is going to change your mind. Perhaps nothing you're going to hear in the future is going to change your mind. But this was done to start a dialogue, to get people thinking about what the next phase of this project is and where we are going. To those of you who have mentioned that we started talking about this project a long time ago, that's right, but it has changed. A lot of things have changed. People who live in our community have changed. You know, what was happened before, it's almost like, why even bother to discuss it? Okay, we will be where we will be in January. I think the hospital has done its best here this evening to describe what's coming forward. You can choose not to come in January. You can choose to wait, and you can watch the meeting on Zoom after January. You can send all the questions you want to the hospital with respect to your thoughts, comments, what you'd like to see. The address is, the email address has been provided. There are many avenues for you to voice your opinions to the hospital. They are here tonight to take them. And I think that's all I want to say about this. And I'm really not sure that we really have to go much further than that this evening, because we're not going to get, there's nothing more that Dr. Baker can say about the status of the project at this point. And again, I want to thank him on behalf of Community Board 8 for coming here this evening. It's, you know, we're not in a room, there's not a dialogue. And I think he, to be honest with you, is showing great restraint in listening to some of the commentary that's coming back at him. And that is not the kind of dialogue. If we want to get to an appropriate place with this project, we just can't be hurling insults and whatnot at each other. It's just not going to be, it's not going to move the ball forward. It's not going to move the project forward. And it's not going to make for an atmosphere that's conducive to compromise or moving forward, no matter where the community board comes out on this, no matter what the project looks like for us to comment on. So I want to thank you. I'll leave it up to the chairs, but I'm not sure that it really makes sense to go further with any more questioning. I'll leave that up to the chairs, but I just want to say on behalf of Community Board 8, thank you for coming tonight, Dr. Baker. And I wish everyone on the meeting a happy Thanksgiving. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Doctor.
So thank you, Valerie. I really appreciate that, and I agree with you. We want to have respectful dialogue, and I really appreciate it. And I understand along the same lines the frustrations can get in and bring emotionality into the context of our comments. I do think that we really don't have any further answers to tonight. So with all due respect to the remaining questions, we'll certainly be back in January to be able to answer those. So I understand the hands, and everybody has a comment and a question. We will be back in January to be able to answer those. But for this evening, again, I thank you for your time. I thank you for your commitment. I thank you for your passion. I wish everybody a healthy and happy Thanksgiving, and we look forward to seeing you again. Have a wonderful night.
Well, are we? Yeah, that's not the end, is it?
No, not quite. One of the board members who I think spoke very poorly, Alita Camp, would like to apologize, and I think we should give her the opportunity, and then we're very close to being done. Go ahead, Alita.
Thank you. My comments, Dr. Baker, were not directed towards you personally, and I understand that there is a difference between functioning with patients and treating patients and the way that this hospital has treated the community from my perspective. I have a history of dealing with trying to work with the hospital. And so I would just like to apologize for having inflamed you and having seemed to be disrespectful. I do appreciate any opportunity to work with the hospital, but this is really my frustration is from the process of ULURP, which is broken, the inability to respond adequately on very short notice. If you're talking about the first quarter that ends in March, and if you're getting certified in the beginning, and the community board, it's such, not only are there issues about the height and the size and construction and everything else, but there are internal issues about the hospital as a hospital. So it's frustration partly with the city and ULURP and partly with how I've experienced hospital responsiveness, but certainly I don't know you and nothing was directed towards you. And I know coming and having 280 people from the community throwing barbs at you or wanting to throw barbs at you is a very difficult experience. So thank you. And again, I do apologize. So I appreciate your attention right now. Thank you.
Thank you. I greatly appreciate that.
Okay. I think that we have come to the end of this topic. And so I know there are a lot of people who still want to speak. But we are going to, as they say, move the agenda, and and all of you, the most vociferous among you, that would be and Elizabeth and Alan, and Gary's waving his arms as well. We're just going to have to wait until they make a real presentation in January. And so I think that we should move forward. And that would be Elizabeth. Now, I don't know if our next guest is here.
I am. I'm here.
Oh, good.
George here?
Yes.
Very good. Well, I'm so glad he's here because, oh, George, there you are. I thought we had to call you somewhere. Welcome here. George is going to be talking to us about creating and preserving housing, particularly affordable housing. You talk to us about what works and what doesn't. And first, he was going to give us a little update on what's happened with City of Yes recently, changes in their votes coming up. And then he's talked to us before, and he's most helpful and most informative on housing. And George, up to you.
Okay, that's great. So let's start with what's happening with City of Yes for housing opportunity. So big news last week, it was passed by City Council, or at least the committees. The zoning subcommittee passed it by a vote of 4-3. The land use committee passed it by a vote of 8 to 2-1. But there were significant modifications to the proposal. So it's different than what you've seen. And right now it's going back to the Department of City Planning for a scope determination, and full council will vote on it. Right now it's scheduled for December 5th. So as I said, they made dozens of modifications. They produced this really useful summary. It's 7 pages long, but I'm going to quickly summarize some of the changes that are going to impact this community district. So first, there were a number of changes to UAP for this community district. The depth of affordability was increased. You've got to go to 80%, or I'm sorry, 40%, or at least some of the units have to be at 40% of AMI. The UAP height increase in the RAB was reduced by 10 feet, making it more proportional to the FAR increase for UAP. And I'm going to be using some language here like UAP, assuming that the board members know what it means because this was in front of you so recently. If I start using jargon, Elizabeth, please stop me and ask me to explain. Madison Avenue. So Madison Avenue has a special district. They changed the bulk rules there, and it has been rolled back to their existing rules, at least for the market rate housing. If you have affordable housing, you don't have to follow those rules. The 30-foot rear yards are retained for smaller lots that are less than 40 feet. If you recall, City of Yes had proposed changing the rear yards to 20 feet. Permitted obstructions in those rear yards have been reduced. If you recall that there were lots of things you could do in that rear yard, and they've been largely rolled back. The CPC special permit is retained for large bulk waivers for transfers from landmarks. If you recall, City of Yes was like, that would be a authorization. Right now it is, if it's a smaller one, it would be a CPC authorization, which doesn't require a hearing or city council. But if you want a bigger one, there's a special permit that is kept. Some of the other CPC authorizations, like for irregular lots, was removed entirely. Others, like the increase for non-complying buildings, were kept. Now, council did not make other changes that were of concern to Community District 8. For example, floor area transfers from the low-density mid-blocks to the high-density tower districts are maintained. So currently, you can't transfer floor area from the R8B to the avenues, but you will if this passes as proposed. Changes to the tower on base building envelope that permit a 15-story base that's maintained. I thought that might be rolled back, but it was not. Changes to the dwelling unit factor. Remember, we have this rule, the dwelling unit factor, which prevents buildings of all studios. Those changes were rolled back nearly everywhere except the Manhattan core, which is community districts 1 through 8 and downtown Brooklyn. And so in CD8, that change stays. And so buildings of only studios could be developed, but that's not really what people are doing in this area anyway, which we're going to talk about. And then parking is unchanged in Community District 8, but a parking requirement is kept or just reduced in selected other locations. So you look at a map and it's like, in some places parking has been eliminated, in other places it's been kept, and in other places it's been reduced. It's a real mix. City of Yes had proposed eliminating it everywhere. City of Yes still has only one affordable housing program, that's the UAP. And again, this is a 20% optional floor area bonus that requires buildings to have 20% of permanently affordable housing at 60% of AMI. And there is this concern that it won't be used much in Community District 8 because it's optional, and developers can get floor area from landmarks or from the mid-blocks to fill up their building envelopes. And also the state subsidy 485X, which is the 421A replacement, which is the tax subsidy that the state provides, cannot be used for home ownership units, which are what we normally see on the Upper East Side in new construction. And so without 485X, the UAP becomes much less attractive. All right, so, but to assess the need, affordable housing need, we have to understand how affordable housing has changed in this community district in recent years. So I'm going to spend a little time talking about affordable housing. We're going to talk about both rent stabilized housing and income restricted housing and how it's changed over time. And, you know, this shouldn't be a hard question to answer, but it in fact kind of is. So as I think most people here know, most rental buildings with 6 or more units built before 1974 are or were at one time subject to rent stabilization. And rent stabilization limits rents, requires lease renewals, among other regulations. Units can be removed from rent stabilization, and many have. Before 2019 changes in state law, most common method was luxury decontrol. New rent stabilized units are also added through new construction. Existing buildings can opt into HPD programs that require rent stabilizations. We see that sometimes, but not often. And while there is a list of buildings subject to rent stabilizations, neither the city nor the state publishes the number of units subject to rent stabilizations in those buildings. So when we're evaluating how rent stabilized units have changed, we really don't have good data, especially at the small area level. And so there's no official database, but the number of units isn't secret. Like, this is a building. This is 351 East 83rd Street, right? So every building has to pay taxes on the number of rent stabilized units they have. And so in their tax bill is the number of rent stabilized units. So it's not secret. And so we know that this building has 75 rent stabilized units. And if we go back in time, you create a rent stabilization history for every single building, and we can see how it's changed over time. So this is Continental. It has 232 units in 2007. It had 127 rent stabilized units, and that went down, 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 down until it hit 75, and it's been 75 for the last several years. So it lost 32% of its rent stabilized units over that time. Since the government doesn't publish the database, citizens took matters into their own hands to essentially create this database from the tax bills. And so it started in 2015, where a citizen programmer downloaded all the tax bills and scraped the number of rent stabilized units out of it for the entire city. In 2020, my office processed the additional tax forms to bring it up to 2020. And then more recently, ANHD has been updating these data. And so what do we find from this? All right, so this is a whole borough-wide map, and there's an online map which we can share with you, and you can explore it by building. Red shows losses in rent stabilized units, blue shows gains, and green shows little change. And just at a glance, you could see patterns are immediately apparent, right? You have lots of little red dots in the Manhattan core. Uptown, you have a lot of green, which means little change. Red means losses. And then you have some big blue dots that go through, where you have big buildings that go in that are subject to rent stabilization. And so since we have it by building, we can summarize it any way we want. And so we could summarize rent stabilized change in Manhattan by community district. And here it is. So Manhattan, and there's two sides of this coin. There's losses and then there are gains, because we're always gaining and we're always losing. And then we have a net change. So Manhattan, the borough, gained 50,000 rent stabilized units in the period, but it lost 118,000 with a net change of about 68,000 rent stabilized units. Community District 8 is at the top of this list, right here. It's lost the most in the period. It is the highest net loss, followed closely by Community District 7, the Upper West Side. 3 community districts saw increases in the number of rent stabilized units. Community District 1 has very few rent stabilized units to start with to lose. Community District 4 has Hudson Yards offsetting substantial losses in Hell's Kitchen. And then Community District 11, they've been keeping their losses low while adding a lot more units. And so, you could zoom into these maps and check out individual buildings, but this is Community District 11 on the right and Community District 8 on the left, right next to each other. And you see these patterns that are very clear, and it's systemic, right? Where you have a lot more red in Community District 8 than you do in Community District 11. And so, what's going on? And so you have the losses in the pre-war tenements, where you have, 11 units going to 2 all the time, and most of them are like that. But then, Community District 8 has these big post-war buildings, like this one at 2nd Avenue and 86th Street. or it has hundreds of units, and this one went from close to 500 units in rent stabilized units in 2007 to about 240 in 2024. They lost half of their rent stabilized units in that period of time. But it should be said, lost units can re-enter stabilization through HPD regulatory agreements, and HPD tries to get the people to sign on. They say, they give financing or whatever they need to do to try to get units back into the program. And here's a building that went from 13 to 41 in 2014. But most new rent stabilized buildings or units in this district come from new construction and use incentives that require rent stabilization. The largest is this one right here on 92nd Street, 231 units, all built in 2014, all rent stabilized. Smaller ones that happen, this is on 92nd and 2nd Avenue. It has 100% rent stabilized with 22 units. It was part of an offsite affordable housing bonus. But remember, and this is very important, is that not all rent stabilized units are affordable. And there's a subset that are, but not all. And at a community board meeting earlier this year about City of Yes, DCP told the committee that Community District 8 lost no affordable housing. And it was such an amazing thing to say. I remember writing it down because I couldn't believe that they were saying it. And that's because DCP's definition of affordable housing is different than most people's, I think. Their definition is affordable housing is housing that is income restricted, meaning you have to get into a HPD housing lottery. And if you get your housing through an HPD housing lottery, then it's affordable. If you don't, then it's not. Income restricted housing requires the housing lottery, right? And if you use that definition, yeah, it hasn't lost any affordable housing. So, we could talk about that, whether that's right or not, but let's look at DCP's definition. So if we use DCP's definition only, how is Community District 8 doing compared to other community districts in Manhattan? So since 2014, New York City Open Data has published the number of income restricted housing, and it does it by building. So here we have actual income restricted housing by building. And what we've done here is we've taken only new construction. We've taken the number of income restricted units and by community district, and then calculated the share. So in the period 2014 to today, Community District 8 had nearly 500 income restricted units constructed, or about 4% of the Manhattan total. 4%. It also publishes income restricted units preserved since 2014. And so let's talk, preservation. So if you're in some sort of regulatory program, you essentially re-up with HPD, and that would count as a preserved unit. So if you're in a 30-year or 40-year regulatory agreement and get it renewed, you would get counted here. And so Community District 8 had 1,091 that were preserved, or 2% of the Manhattan total. This is a surprisingly low number, considering that Community District 8 has a lot of housing units, especially compared to some of these other smaller community districts that just pull off 2% is, it's not very much. So Community District 8 is performing much worse than the other community districts, both in losses of rent stabilized housing and also the production and preservation of income restricted housing. And so why? So HPD has, I'm sorry, there's a strong market, right? And if you look at that map that I showed earlier with all the reds, they're all in, the Manhattan core. And the strong market works against rent stabilization, right? HPD works to keep units in rent stabilization. They try and they do a good job, but a strong market works against it. And that's so it depends on what the market is, and it's probably very highly correlated with the strength of the market. Most of the new developments in this community district are 100% market rate, and 100% market rate, you don't use incentives that trigger rent stabilized. Community District 8 also has very few publicly owned sites where the city can require 100% affordable housing. So right now, East Harlem is getting these 500, 700 unit developments going in, and they're all 100% affordable, and they're done on public land. And this community district doesn't have that same kind of resource to produce those types of units. And also, this is a big one. There have been fewer rezonings in the community district that would trigger mandatory or even the optional inclusionary housing that we see in some areas. And so, let's talk about what UAP, the program that is proposed in City of Yes, would do to the Upper East Side. So let's use some real examples. All right, this is 200 right here. There's two construction projects here. This is 200 East 75th Street. This building has 36 units. It replaced these 4 tenements right here that have 40 units. If you can see I marked the white one. It's the same one. And if this were UAP, this building would have 7 income restricted units. Here's another one. 60 East 86th Street was constructed in 2014. Right here, it has 14 apartments. It replaced about 10 units of housing and a community facility building. And if this were UAP, meaning if it were constructed under UAP, there would be 3 income restricted units. 1165 Madison Avenue is new construction. It has 11 apartments, and it has a quadplex at the top. A quadplex is like a duplex, but it's 4 stories. And if this were UAP, it would produce 2 income restricted units. 1230 Madison Avenue is new construction with 13 apartments. And if this were UAP, it would produce 3 income restricted units. But these few income restricted units will only be produced if UAP is used. And each of these developments, and many of the developments on the Upper East Side, are condos. And income restricted housing and it doesn't really work with condominium ownership. Sometimes what you see is the condo being built and then a small rental building being what produces the affordable housing. And sometimes you can do that on the same zoning lot, but it's very difficult in most of zoning lots. Condos also cannot use the 485X state subsidy in Manhattan. So in Manhattan, you cannot use 485X for home ownership units. It's a geographic discrimination, which is going to make UAP much less attractive. So in sum, many projects likely won't use UAP on the Upper East Side, but when they do, income restricted housing it produces will often come at the expense of rent stabilized housing that is not income restricted, because that's where, like you saw on the 3rd Avenue project, you're replacing tenements with new buildings. And if we define affordable housing only as income restricted, as DCP does, then UAP will produce more affordable housing than what we have. But if we define affordable housing as including all rent stabilized housing, UAP likely will not make up for rent stabilized housing it replaces on the Upper East Side. It will perform better in other parts of the city. That's the thing is I think you have an acknowledgement. Well, I don't know that anybody's acknowledged this, but I think there's a realization that UAP likely won't perform in much of the Manhattan core, but it will perform in the Bronx and in East Harlem and in Central Harlem, where the markets demand smaller rental housing, right? So smaller rental housing will use 485X. It will use UAP because you can nest those incentives together. But housing on the Upper East Side, especially in the western part of the district, is often enormous and condos, and it's not going to work well with this. Since 2007, the Upper East Side has lost nearly half its rent stabilized housing. These losses, in my opinion, have been catastrophic. But it still has nearly 18,000 rent stabilized units. And with the 2019 changes to the state law, losses due to luxury decontrol have ended or slowed down, right? And existing losses in existing buildings have slowed. And a focus on keeping those 18,000 rent stabilized units might be a strategy for this board and the city to consider if you want to support affordable housing on the Upper East Side. That's what I have for you today. I have an appendix with a bunch of other stuff in here. I'm sensitive about time. I'd love to talk more about this if there are questions.
Thank you very, very much. And we'll go to questions. First, members of the public. Any members of the public want to speak on this?
Hi, yes, I raised my hand. Can you see me or hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, there's also noise in the background. Hi, thanks so much. This was very, very informative, George, as always. My question is, it seems like the issue seems to be because the UAP requirement is on number of units, percentage of number of units. Is there a reason why it isn't based on square footage?
Well, okay, it is based on square footage. What I was doing was looking at the programs that were proposed in those buildings, and what you need to do.
I meant the 20% requirement because, like, a giant building that has however many, like the quadruplex, how many? Like, that's what I meant. Yes, they're. I'm sorry, there's a lot going on here.
Yeah.
That's based on percentage of units, no?
That's based on the percentage of units in that building. So the HPD rules require that when you have affordable housing in the building, it needs to be similar to the market rate housing in the building, right? You can't have all the affordable units in the building be all studios, for instance. So if you're doing a mix of 3 or 4 bedrooms, then you have to have a mix of 3 or 4 bedrooms for the affordable units. That's the way the rules work. But I mean, the bigger issue, of course, is that, in condos, you'll never use it because you can't, you can't put affordable condos in a condo building. It's just too difficult.
Other members of the public? Is Alan Harris a member of the public or a member of the board?
Public.
Excuse me?
I'm public.
Okay, you're on.
All right, so hello, Mr. Janes. Nice to speak to you. Thank you, Co-Chair Ashby. My building has 7 rent-stabilized apartments that are been empty for up to 20 years. The building is owned by Northwell, and the building is predominantly now an office building with 20, where the rent stabilized apartments have been taken over by Northwell and used as offices for sleeping accommodations and storage and whatever. I want to keep my statement short. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so okay, let me just say a couple things about that. Is that the data is all about the unit, not whether it's occupied or not. So if a landlord is emptying out a building, the unit remains in rent stabilization whether it has a tenant or not. So it would appear, even if it had been empty for 20 years, it would still appear in the data as a rent stabilized unit. And then second of all, Alan, as you know, there's a certificate of occupancy on buildings like this. You can't take an office and use it, or an apartment and use it as an office without the Department of Buildings approving such a plan. And that's something that Lenox Hill should know as well.
Well, Northwell has had a invalid certificate of occupancy since the year 2000. So I don't know how that works in, but it's an egregious affront to the two tenants that are left in the building.
I hear you.
I don't want to go into the other issues. It's not the place or time. Thank you.
Yeah. And other members of the public, is Mr. Boaz, or is he a member of the public?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Okay, we can. Thank you for being here.
Okay, thank you very much. Interesting meeting so far. Quick question, two-part question. The city of Yes has already passed. I mean, that's it. I mean, they are moving forward with that. And the second part, I know it's only prediction. Assuming it will pass with whatever they are saying, how many new units is it going to add to Community Board 8? Regular units. I'm not talking about even rent control. And how many units what's the prediction of how many units rent control are going to be added?
Okay, so let's do the second one first.
Hello, wait a minute. We will go to the board now, and I just want to put in a couple of, I think, astonishingly stupid approaches that we have not, as a city, we don't save our existing affordable housing while we come up with somewhat peculiar plans to build affordable housing. Well, you're wasting your time and going around in circles if you build out of one hand and you destroy out of the other. And I think the loss that George showed us really illuminates that joke. And I think also the other thing that really astounds me is that HPD did a study of vacant apartments. There are about 200,000 vacant apartments. So we're talking about a great need of apartments. We've got 200,000. And one of the jokes to me is what they are kept off. 22% are waiting for a refrigerator. 26% are waiting for a new stove. I rather think that problem could be solved. So I think somehow we really ought to get the dumber ones out of the way first. And Gail Barron, you were the first.
Sharon Pope Marshall is the first.
Gail Barron is the first.
Go with it. Sharon, are you there?
Yes, I am here, but I heard the co-chair call out Gail Barron, so
All right.
I wasn't sure.
Sharon, you got muted.
Sorry, Sharon. Thank you, George. I think that it was very interesting to look at your statistics because we've always tried to figure out what's affordable, how many units have we preserved, how many units have we actually lost. And I think with the City of Yes, it is a program that has certainly been well-intentioned, but unfortunately, it is just so flawed. And even when you look back at our CB8 votes, we had nothing really passed with rare exception without having votes that were pretty much split. And I think that we've got an opportunity, given the fact that the city council vote is going to be on December the 5th, to really be able to write to city planning and to HBD and ask that they also start to address the preservation of our housing, because as we keep looking and when we asked for height limits, it was because we knew that if we couldn't preserve the tenements, we would end up being in trouble without any restrictions on the avenues. And what George just showed, you take 4 of the tenement buildings and you get a larger building, but you still are not having more affordable housing. And even with the changes that City Council has put in place so far, they don't necessarily benefit our community. So I think rather than a resolution, and I'm certainly happy to hear what everybody else has to say on the board, but I would think that we should write to city planning quickly and to HBD and to our council members, because I would hate to see them just pass the City of Yes the way it's currently constructed, because it's certainly not benefiting our particular district. Are you all?
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
I think that's an excellent suggestion. Thank you very much. Okay, Sharon?
Thank you, Elizabeth. What a phenomenal presentation. Just so revealing. And thank you so much, George, for doing this presentation. I have a couple of questions. So at the beginning, you mentioned that the map was created because someone had downloaded the tax maps. And then in 2020, you added to it. And then ANHD, and I think that's the Association of Neighborhood Housing. Do you know? Do you know?
Yeah, ANHD, Association of Neighborhood Housing
Neighborhood
Development.
Housing. Yes, yes. So I didn't understand, and I was listening to your presentation, where this map actually lives.
Well, right now the map was put onto a web server by my office, meaning like I have a link that we created it. So it'll be in the presentation and you can explore it yourself.
Okay, so my second question, and then I have one more after that. DCP uses income restricted.
Yes.
Is it because they don't know the enormity of the number of units overall? And because it's just easier to go to the HPD website to get information regarding income restricted units?
I think they fully understand.
You mentioned that it was income restricted. So I mean, you mentioned that they said income restricted, but I wanted to get a sense from you as to what you think their thinking is.
Department of City Planning, they're very smart. They know exactly what's going on. I mean, they know that there's an enormous number of rent stabilized units. Absolutely. But, you know, ultimately,
Beyond the income restricted for community board, for beyond the income
sure,
restricted.
sure. But what do they have control over? Right? They have these programs to create income restricted housing, right? And it's when you have MIH and when you have the inclusionary housing, when you have HPD running the lottery, all of that is talking about income restricted housing. That's what the city has control, really direct control over through zoning, and that's what they manage, right? But your point is very well taken. It's like if that's what you see affordable housing as, you're not paying attention to everything else. Like, and I think, you know, as somebody who lives in the neighborhood who used to live in rent stabilized housing, you know, I see rent stabilized housing as an important component of affordability, even though it's not income restricted. And I think that's what most people in the neighborhood and most people in the city think of. The distinction between income restricted and rent stabilized isn't that important, but it is very important to the Department of City Planning.
Yeah, my last question is, you talked about 480X, 485X.
Yep.
What's happening with that?
It's law. It's happening. I don't know how many have used it yet, right? It became law earlier this year. I know that there are, you know, there's developments happening right now. I'm sure that some are using it. I don't know how popular it is.
But it won't be popular on the Upper East Side because of the condo issue.
Well, that's the speculation. I would love to be wrong about this. It's speculation, right? And if you talk to people at Department of City Planning, they've said, you know, we are hoping that developers weigh 485X and UAP and decide not to do condos and instead do rentals or more rentals on the Upper East Side. And, you know, they may do that. I don't know. We don't know. But I think it's also very difficult to go against what the market wants, right? And the market seems to be moving toward, or has been in the recent past, moving toward condos in this neighborhood.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the presentation. Just absolutely phenomenal.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Elizabeth Rose?
Thank you, Elizabeth. I want to echo the thanks to George for a wonderful presentation. My first question is, and can we have a copy?
Oh, of course. This is yours, right? It's
Great.
all yours.
Like individually, not just to Valerie. I really want to get a copy. There were a couple of things that you raised in there that I think are good news for the Upper East Side. The height limit on R8B coming down. I hadn't heard that before. I think that is a great piece of news. That was something that I know I'm raised many times in our group discussions. But I do want to just remind everybody that UAP wasn't even allowed on the Upper East Side in its prior iteration. So the fact that it may not be used a lot, well, before it couldn't be used at all. So there is still a step forward here. And then my last point, really, you made the point in your presentation that there have not been a lot of rezonings on the Upper East Side that would lead to requirements of mandatory inclusionary housing, which is a bigger potential opportunity in some cases than UAP because it's mandatory, not optional.
Yes.
And so I want to take this opportunity to invite you and everybody who's on this meeting to come to the December 12th meeting of the Task Force for Residential Rezoning. That is the task force that is looking at the blocks on the Upper East Side where currently no new residential development can be undertaken because they are zoned for commercial or manufacturing uses only. And that is an opportunity to create MIH, zoned, supported zones. which could potentially help address some income restricted housing units on the Upper East Side. So thank you, George. And then you also made a point about state-owned sites and the potential for 100% affordable. I'm just going to throw this one back out at the co-chairs of this committee. The empty lot next to, or that was supposed to be the Hunter College School of Nursing, that is an empty lot. It is a hole in the ground next to Hospital for Special Surgery. We need to call upon the city to make that housing and to make it a high percentage affordable housing. Thank you all.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Sasha?
Hi. So like everyone else, I want to thank you for this presentation, George. You know, I've lived by the Easton since it went up, and I had no idea it was rent stabilized, despite the exorbitant market rate prices. So that was a great thing to learn from this, and all the other stats, especially as a city worker who works in city-owned real estate assets. And that is part of the problem why 100% affordable things really aren't developed here, because the city really has just about no assets in CB8. But I guess this kind of begs the broader discussion or topic: if aspects of City of Yes really may not end up being applicable here, how do we, and I think most people on this board agree, that the kind of bread and butter of our affordable housing are rent stabilized tenements, especially tenements, even though of course there are like pre-war buildings and even buildings from the 60s that are rent stabilized that haven't converted to co-op. How do we want to see like more housing production built here with a very limited amount of land without just having, you know, entire blocks of tenements bought and sold and redeveloped? And, you know, something I've always thought of that, of course, goes well beyond this board is like the right of first return for those who have been displaced, that I think that would always encourage people to be on board with new development, because they know, okay, I'm not going to be permanently displaced. And I know since 2019 we don't see that happening as much, but I think it's really like a push and pull of priority. To me personally, I live in a tenement that is rent stabilized, so I have a more vested interest in seeing, you know, those kinds of buildings preserved more than seeing new building, you know, one or two new buildings that have lots of units that are mainly like market rate luxury condos. And I don't personally prescribe to the idea of like, if we just build a lot, that will solve the problem, especially in a district like CB8. I think there are many other parts of the city that have like their own weight to pull. Unfortunately, having worked at DCP before, people at DCP really have a negative view of the Manhattan core, especially community boards and districts like CB8. They may not say it, but unfortunately, you know, they look down on things like tenements. They think tear it down, build bigger and better, like, you know, none of that matters. But you know, like, so just thinking of like idea, you know, like in that respect, does City of Yes really matter here for us in the concern of like housing itself? I think there are a lot of aspects of City of Yes that will have like a huge impact elsewhere in the city, and we can see more housing production, but is there really anything to be done with respect to CB8 and City of Yes? Or does it just kind of seem like things will progress as they are, and if people opt into 485X, they will, and that's it? But is there really any place for us with City of Yes?
Well, if I may, can I respond to that? I just
yeah.
yeah. So with what Elizabeth said previously about it's better than what we have, right? Meaning UAP is better than what we have is absolutely true, right? Because the only basically on the Upper East Side. You could do the optional R10 program, which produces very few affordable units, usually off-site, and that's it. And so UAP does give more options. And, full disclosure, I testified in favor of UAP because it's better than what we have, even though it's not as good as we hoped it would be. And I think it's not going to be as good. It's not going to be enough for the Upper East Side, especially if you care about fair housing issues, right? You don't want all of your affordable housing going into communities like the Bronx and East Harlem and nothing on the Upper East Side. You should be wanting the reverse. But it's what we have, right? This is what's in front of us. And so there's going to be an up or down vote on this next week. And so you have to decide, or the council will have to decide whether they vote for it or vote against it at this point, because the modifications have been made, right? All of it's termination on scope and then the up or down vote. And that's all that's left on this. And I think, but I think your question is, what else can the community board be doing? And really, that's the role of community boards, is to push the agencies to do more, to push the ideas, to push them out there. And I know that there can be more done, right? We just have this one vote that's coming up, but there are so many other improvements that could be made.
Thank you.
Thank you, George. And I think that Gail Barron's proposal is a good way to get going, to push the agencies to start on this, and get the politicians or council members, and I think not waste time on a proposal that doesn't produce practically any housing, practically any affordable housing. Let's stop that, and let's go ahead and use the information that is available, that George has shared with us, and get ahead with the job, because I think that affordable housing for people under half AMI is absolutely essential. And a lot of the things that are proposed that we've seen, including bits of City of Yes, deal with a non-existent problem, really, which is homeless billionaires. That's what they build for, as opposed to meeting the real need. So I hope that perhaps we could write these letters. Anyway, I go to Rita Popper.
Elizabeth and George. George, I could listen to you all day long. I have a question, and I have two questions. In the 18,000 number that you just gave about affordable units, does that include Mitchell-Lama co-ops in our district?
So it wouldn't include co-ops, no. It might include Mitchell-Lama rentals, but if you go through the data on this, Mitchell-Lamas are treated inconsistently, and I think it depends on their original agreement, because some are and some aren't. And it's one of those things where, I have an appendix, so there's no public housing in here. Nothing from the, no affordable co-ops, anything ownership, it's not in here, right? If there's, HDFCs are not in here. Roosevelt Island Operating Corporation is not in here, right? So there's a lot of things that aren't in the data. This is about rent stabilized. And so you have to be renting to do it. And then even then, there are some limitations. So, like public housing.
So we know that all of the tenements are all pre-1973
Yes.
construction. All we keep hearing, not all, but we keep hearing from tenants who live there, residents who live there, and according to what Elizabeth just said, that they have really substandard refrigerators and substandard stoves and things like that. And if the owner puts in a new stove and a new refrigerator, does he then take that unit out of rent stabilization?
Oh, I don't, that's not the way it works. Generally speaking, they can make improvements. They're supposed to make improvements to keep it habitable. Uh, and we no longer have luxury decontrol, right? And so it used to be that landlords would invest enormous amounts of sums into the apartments to get them up over the number, and then they would be decontrolled. And that's no, they're not supposed to be doing that anymore.
Thank you. I don't know why somebody needs who needs all those refrigerators and the stoves. People have come before us to say, just the other night, we haven't had a stove that operates for 6 months. And they are in one of the tenements. We haven't had we don't have this, we don't have that. And they have no recourse, and that absolutely kills me.
Right.
Thank you.
I think the problem of no refrigerator is quite easily solved. Craig later.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Good evening, everyone. Hi, George. As always, thank you for a wonderful presentation and all of the insight that you're providing us. So I'm hoping you could help me understand this and give your guidance on where I'm struggling right now. So there are, in my mind, two different pieces here that are sort of in conflict. There is the fact that, as you so eloquently presented, CB8 isn't going to do particularly well in terms of new affordable housing, even though we may get some from UAP, as we've discussed before. Right. But this is a citywide proposal, and part of the issue is that the city has a housing crisis, and the city as a whole will do quite well. And I'm concerned that yes, we are here as community board members to represent our community, but part of representing the community is considering the city at large as well. So I'm a little conflicted there. But at the same time, as you mentioned, we may want to be prioritizing trying to protect tenements and low-rise buildings. But I'm still really unclear as to what the best mechanism to be doing that would actually be. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts as to what we may want to do to consider that. I mean, we've gone through the process of as Elizabeth mentioned, we have the potential rezoning where we can deal with some of the issues in certain blocks on the Upper East Side, but largely we went through the whole 210 exercise, and that obviously isn't going anywhere. And I don't know that that would actually do anything to help preserve existing buildings. How do you do that? And I don't know if you have any opinions that we could perhaps be thinking.
I mean, there are. I mean, I do have opinions. I think you're bringing up great points, and about the citywide aspect to this, and I think that's what's really driving it is the citywide aspects. And the thing is that I do think it'll produce a lot of affordable housing in certain neighborhoods, just not this one. And I, Lower East Side and the Village and Upper West Side, there are neighborhoods that will be suffering, but others citywide, I think it will produce. But like what could you do? Like for instance, something that I have talked about ad nauseum to zoning geeks is, we have this thing called a dwelling unit factor to ensure that ensure that you don't build a building with all studios, you could have a reverse dwelling unit factor so that you, like that building at 1165 Madison Avenue, it has an average of 5,500 square foot per unit, averaging. That's the one with the quadplex, right? All right, so you could have a reverse dwelling unit factor so that, you could, I don't know what that number would be, but maybe 2,000 square feet, so that your development has to average no more than 2,000 square feet per unit. And so right there in that building, you would more than double the amount of units in that building. You could still have your 10,000 square foot quadplex, but then you would have to average it out with smaller units in the same building. And so then you would have a building with a variety of unit types for people of different stages of their lives, which is the kind of thing that we want. It would also, the other disturbing aspect, which nobody is really talking about, but it's been happening for decades, is the conversion of tenements into single family homes, which is happening on the west side and has been going to the east side. I've seen a tenement between Second and First Avenue, in what I call Yorkville, being converted into a single family home, which is like wild to me, right? So, and again, that same reverse dwelling unit factor could be used to ensure it at least stays a duplex, if not a triplex, to essentially preserve the units that you have. And I think there are mechanisms, and this is just one idea, but I think there are many ideas, or there are ideas like this that could be used in different community districts, right? So the city is looking out for the city's interest. It's painting with a broad brush. The community board looks out after the community board's interest, and you can come up with ideas that work here and advocate for those ideas and try to see them happen. Something like what I was just saying.
Thank you. That's really helpful to think about. I appreciate that.
Peggy Price?
Hi, George. Thank you so much. You made a very interesting point among many about rent stabilization. And you pointed out that that was, I think you said, pretty much the best way to go in our community in terms of getting more affordable housing. Well, if that is the case, what would you recommend this committee or CB8 do to expand on and even protect rent stabilization here? What steps should we be taking along those lines?
I mean, it's a good question. I mean, and what I would do first is focus in on trying not to lose rent stabilized housing. I mean, because there's so much that's being lost, and it's being lost when buildings get emptied out for new development and for other reasons as well. I mean, listen, right now, the best way is to work with HPD to try to get buildings, that are in expiring regulatory agreements back into them, to try to get buildings that need financing. Some of these small tenements, I understand. They're like, especially if you have a rent roll of rent stabilized units, sometimes you need financing, right? And if that's the case, HPD can sometimes step up, and you can enter in more units into the program, and they can help you out with low interest financing. That's not the community board's job, but the community board can be a facilitator, right? A go-between, contact the intergov people, try to make connections between owners and HPD and see if you can, make things happen. There may be people on this call that know this better than I do, right? In how HPD functions and gets existing buildings into the program.
Well, let me just one quick follow-up. If the community board in some way reached out to HBD about expanding and protecting rent stabilization, what's the effective way to approach them? Is there certain things that would really catch their fancy or really?
You should, Will and people in the office should have your contacts at HPD. I don't know who they are in this community district. I know in Community District 11, there's like a lot of, back and forth between them. But, you can invite them to come into your community board to talk about these very issues. What is their HPD, what is HPD's housing preservation program? What are they doing in your district? Allow them to, I would be surprised if they would not say, "Oh yeah, let us come in and talk about our success stories with you all," and you could, if you do that, you can talk about how to build on those success stories to expand their efforts in your community.
Thank you. I hope our community board will do that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you. Alida?
Thank you. I'm no economist, George, and it was a really excellent, informative, well done presentation. I'm sure there are plenty more glowing words, so thank you. I'm no economist, but I'm just wondering if there has been any research done on the value, on whether there's an increase in land value as these buildings, these towers, and expensive market rate keep getting built, and what impact that has on landlords wanting to sell their tenement buildings or other buildings because of that. If that's appropriate for now, though.
There are people, there's a lot of opinions on this. I am not well versed enough to really to comment.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alida. Valerie?
Thanks, George. Always well done. Just a couple of comments and then a question. I mean, when we were relaying some of our comments to land use a couple of weeks ago, or they were very interested in the fact that this community board was interested in what was happening in other areas of the city, and that we had taken positions that affected other areas, and were surprised that we were not just self-interested, which I thought was kind of funny, since we were supposed to be looking at this as a citywide zoning change. But to your point about I mean, where I live in particular, in a 1 block radius between 72nd Street and 71st Street on 2nd Avenue, we just got the announcement that finally, or at least it was in the Real Deal, that the property at the corner of 72nd Street and 2nd Avenue, the southwest corner, finally has financing and an investor, and is going to put up, what a surprise, a 20-story luxury building. But 2 weeks before that, on the corner, and we lost 8 tenement buildings there, okay? And then across the street, right to the south of that, on 71st Street, on the southwest corner of 71st Street, we lost 4 more buildings and 3 restaurants and a nail salon. And no doubt that's going to be another luxury development. And then a week before that, on the northeast corner of 71st Street, where there are 3 little restaurants and 4 walk-ups, okay, those all closed. And we're expecting yet another luxury development, at least of 20 stories. And I've been getting, not in my capacity as a CBA chair, but as the president of the 72nd Street Neighborhood Association, like, what can we do? I mean, this is all as of right.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess my question to you is sort of a little bit unfair, but, when does the city then look at what does as of right mean? And in terms of the destruction of affordable housing in our neighborhood. And there didn't seem to be any will to say, hey, if you're taking down 20 affordable apartments, when you put your building back up or whatever you're going to do, you need to at least have that many apartments plus a multiplier of what you're taking down. which would have seemed like, I mean, maybe just obvious to the non-zoning person. At least you have to make up for what you've taken down.
Yeah.
You know, when are there cities that have different as of right rules than we do? I mean, because it just seems like it's open season.
Well, well, and the last question, yes, most cities have very different rules than New York City. The fact that we don't have site plan review in New York City is makes New York City quite unusual on these big developments, and so yeah, it's very, very different, as I'm sure some people on this Zoom can say. But regarding your question on replacing units that were lost. I know there's concern about, can, property rights. Can you force somebody to rebuild units that were lost and from a legal standpoint? And I've talked to lawyers about this, and and some lawyers have told me yes. I think I've heard people from the city say that you can't do that. Um, I think it's a good policy. I think what you're saying is absolutely the good policy. And in fact, I would say, what about more units than just replacement, right? And and there can be ways, instead of requiring it, maybe incentivizing it in ways that we don't do now, right? And this idea that you know, the low-rise tenements, they have bad light, they don't have elevators, there's lots of problems with them from a, sustainability aspect, but they produce enormous numbers of housing, right? I mean, there's so many units in them in this small little footprint, and recognizing that as a huge reservoir of of capacity on the Upper East Side and really the city is something that I think this board can advocate for. What is a policy? What is an incentive to get developers to do that, or a mandate? Whatever it is, it's a good idea, and good ideas find a way of we have to find ways of making those good ideas happen.
Mhm. And then in terms of the incentives and whether this plan actually gets voted up or down, um, you know, we saw for a long time that even that developers were sitting on their properties while 421 had expired and while they finally came up with 485X. So we can
Yeah.
see that, to your point, whether you characterize them as incentives, subsidies, whatever it is, tax breaks, there always has to be a little bit of a sweetener. And so my question to you is, I mean, what do you think the governor's announcement of $5 billion towards affordable housing, how does that all get sort of put in this mix in terms of creating more affordable housing? Because I think everyone has pretty much said that this may create more housing. It's the jury's still going to be out about how much affordable housing it's going to create. But how does what the governor announced, put into this pot make any difference? Or
Well, I can tell you what I've heard. I haven't read, specifics on this, but so they changed UAP in the outer boroughs, and so you now have in some of the bigger projects in lower density districts, they qualify for affordable housing, which is prior to this you had to be in a high density district. That was a major complaint. It was like, most of Queens, no affordable housing for you. And so this changes that. But, those areas, Valerie, they need new sewers, new roads. If you're going to be putting more people out there, you're going to need major, major infrastructure upgrades. There are huge parts of Queens that flood all the time when it
yes,
rains.
I
Like,
know. I have relatives who live in
yeah,
there, but
right. I mean, there's like very serious infrastructure issues out there. And if you're going to be putting more people out there, you really got to address them. And there haven't been the investments that need to go out there. And my understanding is that really a lion's share of this is going to be going not to Community District 8, and that it's going to be a lot of money going into, you know, nuts and bolts infrastructure that should have been done decades ago.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Valerie. And I would like to mention sourly that the community board has had for a long time proposals for special districts on first, second, third, and York. And one component of that was to save the low-rise tenements, which not only saves the building, but it saves the homes of the people who live in it and saves affordable housing. City planning wouldn't even proceed with the certification, but we are on record as proposing this, and I think it would have been perfectly legal. So to do if you do it under a special district. So there are ways of achieving these.
Sure.
Marco.
Thank you. Before to start anything, I would like to ask one question. You has been paid for this presentation or you do voluntarily?
Oh, I am a paid consultant from the community.
So you has been paid?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, now, first of all, the first thing that we have to understand is we have a city and the city is completely unbalanced. The Community Board 8 has the densest in the country. And you want to provide more affordable housing in the densest community board that we have the largest rent control and rent stabilization on the mid-blocks and RAB. So the point is right here is desperately looking for more housing, I think is wrong because we have 110,000 people per square mile, while the other neighborhoods do not have not even half of that or even less than that. So the contribution that should be in different areas. Our community, yes, it's true. We are losing rent control and rent stabilization. But the point right here is the universal affordability plan. This target the RAB, whereas all of them are rent control and rent stabilization. So my point of view is to protect our neighbors. We don't want to see our neighbors leave. So we have to preserve them first, rather to increase more housing, because the other neighborhoods, none of them, they have such a large quantity of people in a small space. We fighting last week on the full board for the street that they are coming, the doctors, that they shouldn't be there, the business, they shouldn't be in the mid-block. They are coming because we are so condensed community. In anything that we do, we impact negatively with our residents, and our obligation is to protect our residents. When you compare your program, you describe the UPA, you describe the rent control, the rent stabilization, and then the income. There are different issues, all of them, and all of them has to be treated differently. You cannot compact each other because there's a different analysis. Now, I'm gonna go directly, because of the time, I'm gonna go directly with Elizabeth mentioned. Elizabeth mentioned is the districts, the special districts, which basically we are calling, and that is a good policy to call 210. You oppose by that, by the way. So you oppose because you went to the mechanicals control the mechanicals, which is wrong too. And I can prove it to you. This is wrong in sustainability. This is wrong in direction. We don't have nothing in the benefit of that. On the contrary, the developers has been demolished affordable housing without no control. Somebody suggests mandatory inclusionary housing. Well, at least it should be mandatory with the unit that was demolished. That it should be mandatory. But for the rest, we had to be open for the developers that come. What we had to do, if we have a control of the height, now we have a power to negotiate the height and the floor area with the developers. We can give you more floor area. We can give you more height of the buildings with the benefit of creation of affordable housing. But no, we don't have that one. So this is the biggest problem in our community. I did a study and I found it that the pattern in our community is 385 units and 12 developments that happen. You show one of them. 385 units was demolished, and just only was rebuilt 32. Look what happened, this 32. It happened in RA, in R10A, which is a contextual district with a limit of 210. Most of the developers that have no limit in the height, usually the density is coming between 54% to 20%. So basically, right there is telling this, we demolish affordable housing, we pull our low-income neighbors out of our community to build luxury housing. And that is wrong. And I think my point of view is, in some way, some fellow community members, they stop the intentions to move in that direction. But the argument that city planning does for the 210 is baseless, is unsustainable, because I proved it to them, and I did a study in that direction, that they are doing wrong in our community. Let me give you the city of Yes. He said that they said that they're going to build 109,000 dwelling units in 15 years. Mayor de Blasio built 140,000 on 10 years. So right there, the city of Yes is baseless. It doesn't have no argument. The only thing is they give you just only for the real estate people to make more money. That's what it is. The issue, they said they're going to build basements on legalized basements. Basements is legal. This is a shame to say that we're gonna legalize the basement. What they can say is legalize the cellar. The cellar is no habitable, is not countable, is no floor area. So in that direction, they even mislead us to believe that basement is not legal. Basement is legal. It's countable as floor area. So my point is, what we're doing right here is basically, I think we need to separately those issues. One day we can discuss the income restricted, which is basically a call different kind of projects that are developing right now. The other ones, it should be rent control and rent stabilization. By the way, about rent control and rent stabilization, there is one tenant that is unwilling to live on 86 on First Avenue. This tenant, happily, Senator Kruger put a law that he cannot evict him. What happened over there? Business, because Mr. Extel, he wants to make more millions and he doesn't want to reach an agreement. But whatever it is, the point is, this development is holding right now. And it's holding for a good reason. And if Mr. Extel is successful to evict this person from this development, the entire rent control and rent stabilization is over, because the developer, the only thing that they can say, they put drawings, they put saying, I'm going to demolish, and everybody out. So I think it's wrong in that direction. We need to create, at least in Community Board 8, we need to create something that protect those existing neighbors that live in our neighborhood. And if we can increase just a little bit more housing, I think is welcome. But our efforts, it should be those families that pay more than 50% of the income toward the rent. So that means these people will become very soon homeless. And we need to stop that. We have to reduce the intensity, the homelessness, they create more homeless on the streets. And that is it should be our priority in our community board. Stop help those people that pay large quantity of their income toward rent. I think I don't want to continue more, but I'm very happy to discuss deeper about, because I did the study in the Upper East Side. And I think 210 make a lot of sense. It helps us to have control of the developer say, you want more height? Okay, you have it, but build something that is in benefit. So we have an opportunity to negotiate. But if we don't have no high limits, the developer, they can keep demolish all affordable housing. Good example, Excel, 79 on First Avenue. He demolished everything, 79 dwelling units. How many units built luxury? Zero. How many affordable? Zero. They put a hospital. So the point is, we have to establish our needs, and we have to present our needs to the politicians as well as to the Department of City Planning and HPD, because right now there is another development every Third and Third Avenue. They come and they cheat us. They say that there are 50 dwelling units. In reality, it was 90 dwelling units. In order to do that, it is a long process to change the certificate of occupancy from 90 to 50. And there are also rent stabilized units. That's what one of the tenants said. So the issue right here is we need to create a policy of housing for our community. For the other communities, we cannot discuss, because if we cannot resolve our problems, why are we gonna go to the other communities? So that is in our direction we have to start thinking. And I don't want to continue, I'm gonna end it. Thank you.
I think that we have responsibilities to our community, but we're part of the city, and I think saving the 200,000 vacant units, getting them back on the market, that's citywide. And I think that as we move forward and make recommendations, that we can and should make proposals both that protect our community and protect the affordable housing in our community, but also as citizens of New York, general citywide proposals for more affordable housing and more housing. So should we have one hand who, Mr. Morris, you are not a member of the community
No,
board.
I'm not public. Public. I'm not part of the committee. I have a just basically simple question. These rent stabilized units you talk about, it's not affordable housing. They're not income restricted.
That's right.
So you could be making millions of dollars and live in one of these units.
That's right.
All of them. So the one thing,
but not all of them are occupied by millionaires. But yes,
but you know what I'm getting at. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Okay. So the whole thing is hypocritical. It's sorry, BS. So if you want to first start off, you should focus on the rent stabilized use and put income restrictions in there. You know what I mean? There are people like doctors living in there, people who are bankers and making high six-figure salaries. What about the new professionals coming into the younger people making 40 to 70,000 a year or something like that? They should be in these units, not these people making six figures, or maybe who knows? Depends on how nice these places are. They could be 2 or 3 bedroom apartment, rent stabilized units. And this is a hypocrisy of our politicians in New York State and the council, because a lot of these people live in these rent stabilized units and they make six-figure salaries. So you got to focus on that first. That's the number one issue right there. And you're talking about this other stuff, the city of yes or whatever. It's pretty much BS. Yeah, we do need more supply and demand. There's always going to be more demand than supply. But in the meantime, work on the rent stabilized use and put a mean restricted test on there on the income. That should be the number one priority of the state. That's it.
Well, I think you have also, as you think about that, there ought to be perhaps a way of increasing their rent and going into housing, because I think one might be uncomfortable. They might be happy they've lived there for years and want to stay on simply because it's their home and their community. And then perhaps they should make it more of a, be forced to make more of a contribution to affordable housing when they're benefiting from low housing. But I think you have to think about the other side of that issue too, which is throwing out people who may want to stay there and be perfectly happy to pay a good deal more. Anthony.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And thank you, George. I think that the point that George made, two things. First, I think that the point about millionaires living in rent-stabilized apartments is probably anecdotally true, but is less the norm than don't shake your head, is less the norm than you might imagine. And attacking housing that is affordable for more people is, in fact, as much of a danger as building only market rate housing.
Mm-hmm.
And if the alternative is that some people successfully gain the system, it is better to have those 18,000 units that are price controlled rather than income driven. Seems to me to make a lot of sense. And I think that that's the wrong enemy. The enemy, if we're to identify one, is the I can't do the arithmetic fast enough, the 200,000 square foot building with 13 apartments.
Yeah. Right.
And I think that, and that's because there is a market for that apartment in our neighborhood. That doesn't make it on of its own wrong, but that seems to be an excess of the free market that we should maybe be looking at instead of picking on those 18,000 rent stabilized units.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Michelle.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you, George. I just want to make a couple of comments based on a few things that Marco has said and Anthony has said, and that is this. This community has advocated and actually filed applications for a 210 height limit on York 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Avenues. It is our belief that that would preserve the tenements because there wouldn't be such a need to knock them down by the sale of air rights, for the sale of air rights, and for lots of other reasons. I want to go a step further with that and talk about the R10A on York 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Avenues. And it seems to me, and I know Marco feels this way too, and I think he was expressing that with the R10A, you have a height limit of 210. However, you have a bonus. If you put in affordable housing, you have a 20% bonus so that you can now have a height limit of 230 feet. In our particular community, I'll only talk about our community, that to me makes an awful lot of sense on York 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Avenue. It supports what this community has had a resolution on, and that is height limits going through a special district. I don't really know or care about what the mechanism is to get there, but I would take it a step further and say that R10A on those avenues is the vehicle for both the height limit and for more affordable housing, because that's an incentive for a developer. If there's a height limit of 210 in the R10A, that developer has an incentive to build 20% affordable housing if he he can go to 230 feet. So that's incentivizing construction and building. Now, while we are getting so many low density buildings on the Upper East Side, there is a market for them. I'm happy to have them because a good percentage of that's your tax base up here. And you need high income people in this area and in other areas around the city. It's unfortunate that the city is so compartmentalized. I would like to see a broader base of income levels in every neighborhood. But if we're just talking about our community tonight, I think one of our big things that we should push and solves a lot of our problem is the R10A on our avenues east of Lexington. The other thing is, with respect to the tenement housing, it's the tenement owners that are selling the air rights to the developers who are building, the 300 and 400 foot buildings. It would be a good law if those tenements, when they sell the air rights, in order for that to go through, that the tenement building owner, the donor site, has to cure any violations that are on that property, which they currently do not have to do, and that they have to bring that property up to current housing standards, however they're defined. And I think just permitting selling the air rights, which is a big financial bonus for the donor site, which is a tenement. So you've got a landlord making a lot of money who could probably afford to upgrade that property and raise its value long term. And then if you're giving the benefit to the receiver site, he's building, if he sees the need and he thinks it will sell, he knows his market, it's a low density building and he's making a bunch of money and he's got people in there that are our tax base. They support our stores and the restaurants in the area. That's fine. But they should have to upgrade the tenement housing. But the height limit on York 1st, 2nd, and 3rd would be a tremendous benefit to get affordable housing in this community using the R10A. We have supported it. Some of us have worked on this extensively, have sent our thoughts to city planning and to whoever would listen to us, made presentations. Marco's done a study. We've worked hard on this. So I throw that out to you. If you're looking for a resolution, maybe not tonight, and I can't make it because I've spoken, but a resolution tonight or at another time about a developer who a site donor who is selling air rights, having to cure violations and upgrade the property might be a good resolution. I don't know how that gets incorporated into law, if it can be done. I don't know. The legislators have to look for that. But to me, that would go a long way in solving the problem. So thanks for listening. Good presentation tonight. Lots of good ideas.
Thank you, Michelle. Ed, you're up.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Sorry, I have to use this screen, folks. I froze up earlier in the meeting and my video has gone sideways. So I'm sorry I can't see you. Like everybody else, George, a great presentation. A little different angle, and maybe for another meeting, but I just want to throw it out there because we're talking about supply and demand and the economic aspect of it. And I hear all the politicians keep talking about how we have to build our way out of it. And I was just wondering, George, if you can speak to this. And I don't know if we have a correct number, but I hear this all the time that we have 200,000 warehouse departments kicking around here in the city. And that the reason why they're offline is that the landlords have to upgrade them. And forgive me for making it overly simple, but it seems something along the lines of, if you're renting and new tenants come in, you're painting, or if there's damage to the wall, put in a new drywall, or as we talked about before, it's time for new appliances, a new refrigerator, or the bathroom needs upgrading, or something along those lines. But there are varying degrees of why these apartments are not getting online, because it either costs too much, according to the landlords, to bring them up to speed, or whatever it may be. And I don't want to go on and on, but I'm sure there's some level of gaming going on somewhere in here as well. Is anything that's bureaucratic, it gets gamed.
Yeah.
But I was just curious about, what are we doing about that? Because it seems like we have a lot of stock. And my last comment, then I'll kick it over to you, is this. What vexes me about this, and I find it almost mind numbing, is that it's 2024. In 2007, when people were, some were saying, perhaps building more houses might not be such a hot idea, as, we have a bubble going on. And forgive me, but I think some folks, policymakers, decided that in order to speed up the market, we're just going to knock houses down. I seem to remember video of that somewhere, of which just, again, the market, the allocation of resources, Adam Smith, the invisible hand not working very well. Anyway, I'm just curious where that fits into this, because it seems like with the 200,000 and all this building, and to people's point, 20 here, 30 here, we got 200,000 kicking around. Where does that fit in, or do we need to have another meeting about that? And by the way, just a quick aside, I was happy to see John West here. John, sorry I can't wave and say hi. Nice to see you here at our meeting. I know I've been trying to get you here for a while. Thanks. Anyway, George, your thought on the 200,000.
So I don't know a lot about housing vacancy. I know there's a housing vacancy survey. It got quoted all the time. It's important, but I don't spend a lot of time with those data. I can't really comment on it. I know that there's a lot of economics. There's a lot of complaining in the real estate community about the 2019 changes, and there's talk about warehousing. I cannot say anything more than anecdotal information on that. And it's something that I think is really important, though, Ed, and yeah, it's something that we should know a lot more about, and we should understand the motivation of people, and what is the actual vacancy rate when you include units that are not for rent and kept off the market. And what would it take to bring those back in? But in terms of build, there's some of you are old enough to remember Amanda Burden. Amanda Burden was the chair of the Department of the City Planning Commission and on the Bloomberg era. And one of what you should always do is listen to the exit interviews of people like Amanda Burden or Alicia Glenn or Vicky Bean, because then they tell you when it's fresh in their mind what they really thought. And I'm going to read you a couple of sentences that Amanda Burden said 11 years ago. She said, "I had believed that if we kept building in that manner and increasing our housing supply, that prices would go down. We had every year almost 30,000 permits for housing, and we built a tremendous amount of housing, including affordable housing, either through incentives or through government funds, and the price of housing didn't go down at all." That was 11 years ago. And that was Amanda Burden, which, when you think about if you have any history with her at all, that is an amazing thing for her to say.
Echo that. Thanks, George. I guess we have Luigi, not to jump in.
Okay.
Hi. Yes, I'd
All
love
right.
to chat.
Luigi, please.
Yes, Luigi Racanelli here. I spoke last time at the last week or last week at the other board. I'm a resident at 170 East 83rd Street, the apartment complex on 83rd and 3rd. I would love to chat now since it's somewhat appropriate, but if you prefer me to wait and chat during the old business segment, I can do that as well. So I'll leave that up to you. Okay, I will continue, but if you feel
please do.
Okay. So thank you. So again, I'm here because I actually think a lot of what we're saying, we're hearing tonight. And Jordan, thank you for jumping on. I think actually the data and everything you showed is actually fascinating. It was a great lesson learned for me personally. So as a quick refresh, I'm attending at 170 83rd Street. Yeah, and that is the building in which Douglas and Development has knocked down, has come in, bought the building, knocked down the south side of the building, completely demolished it. There were once 36 units there, over 20 of which were rent stabilized. They are now looking to, they're now looking to they're going to HPD for the voluntary inclusionary program, claiming that it will add 25 rent stabilized units to the area. However, if you look at 4 or 5 year look back, in totality, it's actually not an increase. It's actually going to be a decrease or a very slight increase at the most conservative and generous calculation. But it was very similar. There were several years of there having been no units in the back or units in the back that were rent stabilized but completely vacant. And it was very frustrating because they're being counted as rent stabilized, but no one's getting the benefit of actually living in there. But part of why we're here today is because we actually have a December 4th deadline of which in which the community board can appeal or write a letter to and appeal this to appeal to the HPD. And I'm highly recommend and encouraging the board to do so. Honestly, not necessarily that the ultimate outcome isn't that this happens, but more so that this process be done in the right way and that Douglaston, communicate a little bit more information. And they have had no communication with us tenants, and so we're just concerned that this is not being done for the right reasons. That in totality, they're really not adding many units to the total to the total rent stabilized count, and that really for all of this, they're building a 480 story luxury tower that within a 5-6 year period is not going to be increasing the number of rent stabilized units, and all that to give them a 40-year tax payment. I just don't think is fair. So again, just kind of asking the board to appeal this and write a letter to HPD on our behalf would be fantastic.
Thank you.
And again, it's a December 4th deadline, so that would have to be done relatively soon.
Okay. I think we should probably wrap this up soon.
Yes.
And would we like to start off writing to HPD and city planning, asking them to go ahead with this, with working on this problem and getting our electeds to press that and to ask that they not waste their time on City of Yes, or divide this up in some way. I think we've got a lot of information now, and I don't think we don't have much time if we want to stop them wasting their time on City of Yes. and starting with what they should do. But that's one way we should go or could go. And or would you like in the future to study and then make recommendations based on what George has wonderful information to start on. So I don't know what, if any steps people want to take now or just ignore it. But Valerie, you're up.
I'm a little confused because I thought we were on what might be considered old business and talking about Luigi Racconelli's comments, which I wanted to address a little bit. So I don't want to disrupt what you just said, but I kind of thought we moved on. But you tell me, guys, before I start talking about the Douglaston development.
Okay, I think very quickly, I think that we were hoping to come out of this with come out of George's discussion with a letter from this committee to city planning about the city of Yes. And I think so that's just to wrap that little piece up. I know that you have something to say, Valerie, about the whole Douglaston issue. But anyway, that's sort of where
Well, I don't want to
thought
jump
we were.
ahead, so that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. I mean, I don't know what the proposal is on what kind of letter to send. I mean, it's not really in front of city planning right now. The letter, I mean, the plan is really in front of the
I'm
city.
sorry, for the city council.
Okay, so.
Yes,
Sorry,
I
my
think
fault.
we want what Gail was talking about was kind of what we had in mind, was because the a lot of what we want is either HPD or city planning. It is both that will have to, working on the vacant apartments and things like that go to HPD, not the city planning. But I think that if we write to our council people asking them to support this, which I think is quite sensible, if we see them and ask them, to not waste time on City of Yes, I think we're stronger because City of Yes is supposed to do what we're wanting, only it doesn't. I think we're stronger when we say, don't do this, but please do this right. And I think writing to both agencies who can do this and then to the council members, it works out better. And where did you, I've lost Gail. I thought you had your paw up.
No,
Oh,
she's
there
there.
you are.
There she is. There she is.
I think that the major point we want to make is, even though we know that the city of Yes was well-intentioned, we want to preserve affordable housing in whatever manner it happens to be, the tenements, rent controlled, rent stabilized, and get to HBD, get to city planning. And we're able to say that we have always, over the past 10 years or close to that, within this community board, advocated for the preservation of the tenements and the existing affordable housing. And we are concerned that the city of Yes is not really addressing that. And with the statistics that George has given us, we're able to show that we're very unlikely in our district to secure any new affordable housing under the city of Yes proposal. So that we understand. it is what it is, but let's make sure that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, so that in addition to not getting new real affordable housing under the City of Yes proposal, we also are not protecting the units that are affordable. And I think working with HBD, working with city planning, it's a way to not be I don't think we can be negative. I think what we have to do is figure out what is our issue and how can we protect what's already in place. Some of the things that Michelle has said, how we get what George points out, maybe low income financing so that the tenements can continue to stay tenements. That's what I'm thinking about. Because if not, we'll just keep every time, as Valerie points out, you walk on 71st Street, you walk on 83rd Street, you keep seeing on the avenues the affordables being destroyed and demolished and luxury high rises being built. So that's why I think we really can't delay this. We should do it very strategically, but I believe it's the proper time, and particularly for Julie and Keith to see that this is something that we want them to support for the districts that they represent.
Thanks a lot, Gail. Michelle?
Yeah, of course, I would be for such a letter. But to me, to just say preserve affordable housing, there's no vehicle to do that. These are property without the R10A zoning, because these are privately owned properties. And if there are available sites adjoining a tenement and a tenement owner is offered a lot of money to sell his air rights so that the development next door could go real high, that developer would probably do that. That does preserve that site, but it doesn't require that developer to improve the living standards on that site. Now, I would be for this more if in that letter we can say that you can preserve affordable housing by supporting the R10A district on York 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, and spell out the reasons that we said, and with a proviso of requiring the donor site to cure any of the violations, and to upgrade the apartments to market to some standard of living, which I can't define. But to me, that would give the City of Yes something to actually vote on than to say, preserve our affordable housing. I mean, under what mechanism? They have no ability to go to the private owner of a residential building and say, we are not allowing you to do this, we're not allowing you to do that. I don't know what governs that. But if there was a letter like that, I would support it. And also it's in keeping with what we've asked for in the past. So, if there could be that, I would support it. I don't think we don't need a resolution for a letter. But Valerie has to sign off on this letter. So if that meets her standard,
Well, I
that's
mean,
what we need to know.
you guys can put, to Gail's point, I don't think this letter isn't saying vote against City of Yes. It's that we think that City of Yes doesn't go far enough to help our community both encourage affordable housing, but what we're seeing, and preserve the affordable housing that we have. And, here are a couple of ideas of things that we're thinking about. So, I mean, if you guys want to work on the body of the letter, again, I think it's in keeping with everything that we've discussed. So I don't, tonight and over the length that I've been on the board. So if you want to start putting a letter together, that's fine. I think, and then, we can take a look at it, and I'm happy to send it because I don't think it would be inconsistent with anything that we've done. Right. I mean, we voted in favor of many of the planks of City of Yes, And even, you know, I would say that it hasn't come up tonight, but in terms of the parking mandate, even that got, you know, wasn't eliminated. So we did get a lot of the things that we were looking for. So
I think that wasn't eliminated in outer districts, though. I don't think that's going to apply to Manhattan core.
Right. Well, no, it was never going to apply to a Manhattan core, but it was being jeopardized in many of the other boroughs.
Outer boroughs,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, it was never coming back to
Right. To
the
us.
core.
To us.
So anyway,
so that's
I'm
what I
happy
would
to-
propose in
so-
that letter.
So I'm happy to, you know, I don't think we have to get it out in the next 2 days, but if you guys want to work on it, I'm happy to. I think it's, again, it's consistent with all of our positions, and it will give Keith and Julie something to work on going forward.
I would also, if I can suggest, Valerie, to send it to the state officials as well, because they play a budgetary role in housing. So Rebecca should certainly get that letter.
I mean, we will send it to the usual suspects, including
and the
state
mayor.
planning and the mayor.
And that's fine. And we'll do that. We'll work on the letter and get that to you. And so if you want, why don't you move to that little bit of old business, because there is a new business item that we want to talk about.
Oh, okay. First of all, go ahead, Craig. Sorry. Did Craig want to say something?
Well, I know he does, but.
Yes, thank you.
Go
No,
ahead.
if we are going to be going beyond what Gail proposed in her letter, I would like to not oppose it in some way. I don't want to be included as part of I think we should be taking a vote to see who would support the letter as written, because not all of us agree with everything that would have been added to it. So I think it's just out of transparency for members that we should have the ability to either say yes or no to the letter. But what Gail had proposed in that language, I would have completely supported.
So are you saying that you're not supporting what are you not supporting? I just
I was always against the 210. I don't necessarily support the language she proposed in regards to R10A. I'm not looking to debate that right now, but those are things that I think would be going beyond the scope of what we were originally talking about, and that would be appropriate to put in a letter without people having a chance to say that they don't agree with the letter. And that's all I'm asking. I'm not asking to debate it, but I would just like to be on the record in opposition to it if certain parts that I don't agree with are in there, just like we would if we were passing a resolution.
I think perhaps we could solve that one by the start being what Gail proposed, and when we get to the nitty gritty that would follow, you know, say do this, and there's plenty of information. There is plenty of information out there already on how to do it right and how not to do it right. So perhaps if people are comfortable with what Gail proposed, working on that perhaps without tiny details, that would be a good start. But Valerie, where is Ed? Ed is going to introduce the
well, I think Elizabeth.
Are you
I think
there?
Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Elizabeth?
Okay. Over to you, Ed.
I'm introducing. Where are we? We're at the old business. Where are we at?
I think we're trying to finish up on the letter first.
Yes,
Anthony
sorry.
is trying to finish up on the letter. Go ahead.
No, I'm just trying to move us. Move
Oh,
us
okay,
to
okay,
old
okay.
business.
So the letter is going to be what Gail is proposing, and we'll go back to the videotape, and so that everyone can
Right.
be on board with at least that part of the, that will be the framework of the letter. And if we move forward on anything in particular, if I'm hearing what Craig is saying, and I think I am, that's all that the letter should really be. So I would just say to the committee people, go back and watch Gail on the replay and put something together, and we can look at it from there and get that to
Yeah.
Okay.
To us.
Okay.
Yes.
Now let's talk about Douglaston, Valerie.
Okay.
Right.
Hold
Right.
on 1 second. I'm actually in my
She's
office.
moved away.
Okay. Okay. Let's talk about Douglaston. So I just want to say again, appreciate Luigi Raccanelli coming to our full board meeting and all of the other residents who came from Douglaston to our meeting. We have been speaking with Keith Powers' office about the issues that were raised. And Carolyn, I believe, Luigi, you can tell me the answer to this, has reached out to you, I believe, correct? I mean, can we unmute Luigi, please? I don't want to.
Yes, she has. I've had a couple calls with her.
Okay, so I don't know what the status of that is.
I mean, it's moving forward. It's somewhat positive, but at the same time, there is a deadline, and that's not, to my knowledge, going to be or has been extended. So I think it kind of two things happening simultaneously. But again, in light of the deadline, I don't think there's enough time for whatever outcome comes from there, which has not been materialized yet. But there has been some positivity. She's heard some of our complaints. She's gone, has gone to reach out to the board, has reached out to Douglaston. But again, I don't think there will be a resolution on that end prior to the board.
Well, I'm not sure in terms of, sorry, I'm not sure in terms of what is it that you want us to say?
Yeah, well, I think in light of everything that we heard tonight, I think this is actually like the perfect opportunity for the board to kind of flex its muscle, if you will, and be able to say to the community, to HPD, hey, like, we don't think necessarily that the way this has been trying to be accomplished is the right thing. And maybe the answer is, and so again, just basically you have a 45-day period in which you have to respond to HPD. If you don't respond, the application continues to move on as if you okayed it. If you do okay it, that's one thing. Or there's the third option, which is you push back and say you're not supporting it. So again, I would encourage you to write something that says that you're not supporting it, and perhaps you will get your support there so long as a certain things occur. And I would like to, I think it would be great to put us all in a room. I feel like Douglaston came to you on that October 22nd meeting because they had to, right? Part of the HPD process is they have to form the community board. I would actually, no matter what happens here, as a personal recommendation, I would actually say that moving forward, I think the board should, in future situations like this, I think the board should require the developer to provide notice to the tenant, so the tenants could have been at that meeting. I think if you require them to notify us to put signs in the building.
Well, I don't think we can require them to do something that the statute doesn't require them to do. And I honestly, to be fair,
if they're coming to your meeting, I don't see why you can't ask them to notify tenants and show you proof of it. Or not, then you push it back. You say, okay, you can come, but you come on X date and you push it back. Everything here is they're trying to get things done quickly so they can continue their moving. Every day they can't build is dollars lost in their pocket. But anyways, that's a whole other recommendation. For tonight, what I'm asking is for a letter recommending that this process not move forward, honestly, because I don't think you have enough information, and I think the information you do have should show that Douglaston isn't necessarily doing this out of the goodness of their heart, as they indicated and implied in their October 22nd meeting.
Well, no, they never said they were doing it from the goodness of their heart. In fact, I started that inquiry and Elizabeth Rose finished it. it was sort of a quid pro quo for them getting their building on Third Avenue. So
Well,
I don't think
what they did
anybody.
say was this is part of their arm of. Well, for the very first part of the conversation, he actually was not associated. They were not tying the north side, our project, to the tower. It
Right.
wasn't
No,
until
I
multiple
agree with
people
you. I
teased
agree
that
with
out
you.
of him.
But we did get that out of them.
You
So
did eventually, yes.
So
But again, the ask is to push back to request that this not move forward until either additional information be made or until they include additional units, because at the end of the day, in a short window of time, they are not increasing the total number of rent stabilized units over a 3 to 5 year look back.
okay, I mean, I'm guys, you're running this meeting, so I think there are people who want to talk.
Yeah, can I just jump in real quick? I'm sorry, I don't have a thing, and sorry to jump the line, but I just want to say, just as a quick aside, that for those, I know Rita, I see Rita still is here, and people have been on the housing committee for years and years. This raises an issue that I've had trouble with over the last decade. And those who are on the call who are attorneys, you may be as sensitive as I am to this. As officers of the court, as lawyers are, as architects are, and professionals have other duties imposed upon them by the law when they go to these public forums. What I'm getting at is, as lawyers, we just can't go walking into court and just saying whatever it is that comes into our head to get whatever it is that we want. We're obligated to be, straight, honest brokers. Unfortunately, at these community board meetings, there is no such requirement. And I'm not saying, and I'm not casting aspersions before I start getting, people on Twitter giving me a hard time. I'm not saying lawyers come to our community boards and lie, but I'm just saying that sometimes in the heat of the moment, sometimes human beings and their whatever it is. And what I'm getting at is, this problem at 170 encapsulates what I'm getting at for the last 10 years. Is I'm torn, and I think you are too, Valerie, if I may, by this sense of the developer comes and says, oh, the tenants aren't aware, and it sounds good, but then 3 days later at the full board, at the meeting, I have to tell you, I sat there and Hunter just aghast going, was I at the same meeting? Because you all showed up at our full board meeting, and it was like a totally different view of the same situation. And all I'm getting at is, I have some sympathy here to, I'm not saying I'm going to go along with everything that the tenants are saying or the developer is, but what I would really like is for everybody to be in the room. Getting back to the idea of law and adversarial situations, is that everybody's in the room, everybody can hear what each side is saying at the same time in real time. It's very hard, in my opinion, to make decisions when one party comes in, makes an ex parte presentation, and then the next week somebody else comes in and gives you a completely different version of the story. And I just wanted to make that comment before we go on in terms of how we figure out how to wrangle with that, because I'm very troubled by it. And maybe it's something for down the road that maybe as a board we can lead on. But I really have seen this as a problem over the years. And I know there's a lot of pressure, as we've talked about at this board, and as George Janes and we all have talked about tonight. Real estate, there's a lot of money. A lot of pressure comes with that. And our district in particular has a lot of pressure. Let's admit it, folks. We have very expensive land. And look, we've talked to our friends downtown working on Wall Street, the pressure that comes with that. So I'm just making a quick observation. Sorry to jump the line. I'll let it go back, but I just wanted to throw that out there for our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed.
Thanks for
I think we don't currently have enough information to be able to do more than continue to go around in circles on this one. That's the problem. And well,
No, I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. I'm not disagreeing. I mean, my druthers would be, and again, I want to hear from everybody else, but I think to Ed's point, we heard one side of the story on one night, we heard a different side of the story on another night, and
I think
pending the thoughts of others, I would prefer to write a letter that just said, this is exactly what happened. So we feel that we can't give a recommendation or say that we approve of what Douglaston is doing just because we don't have enough information. And
I agree. I agree completely, Valerie. I think that's what we should be doing. And I think that that's all that we can do at this point until we have, or someone has everybody in the same room to have some kind of real conversation about it. We are not doubting what anyone is saying, but is that fair? Does everybody, would some people just sort of, rather than continuing to discuss this, if we could just
I think
nod
Elizabeth
vigorously?
has her hand up. She wants to say something, and Mark, she hasn't
And
said
so
anything
does
yet.
Marco. Okay. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Thank you all. I will try to be brief and quick. From a practical perspective, we can't say that we approve it. We can't say that we disapprove it. We have not voted on it. We will not have a full board meeting before December 4th. What we can do, and what I would support us doing, is write a letter that says we are concerned. We have heard a great deal from the tenants that differs from what we heard from the applicant. And we encourage, I mean, effectively, let's make this we want to ask for some mitigating points. We would encourage or request that as this process proceeds, that the developer be required to have a regular meeting, call it, once a month, with a tenants committee. They may or may not choose to invite CB8 to participate. We may or may not choose to participate. But at a minimum, there should be a regular meeting with a tenants committee. And, if there are other mitigating types of requests like that, that are common sense things that we could add, that would be great. Like, regular notice to all tenants. Anytime, a service in the building is going to change, there should be at least a week's notice to all tenants. Whatever those kinds of things are, I think that's something that we can do. I think it's within the purview and scope of the chair to express those kinds of concerns and make some common sense suggestions. But from a practical perspective, we can't approve, we can't disapprove.
That's fine. That's fine. Are we generally in agreement with this?
Yeah.
Marco?
He's not unmuted.
I know.
Thank you. Okay. First of all, let's go clarify one point. The 210 is not debatable. That's the position of the
Marco, we moved past that.
Yeah,
we moved past it. No, we don't.
Now, let me go to another direction. Let me go to another direction. Now, for the tenants, I strongly recommend call HPD and put tenant harassment. So he will have serious trouble in that direction. The second part, yes, I agree with the suggestion. The suggestion in the letter, it should be no reduction of density when there is affordable housing in that development, because this is the only situation we can protect the tenants. There is no other way to protect, because right now, I don't know what happened, but the point is the developer came, they said one part, and that's not true. In reality, 90 units never was changed the CO. So therefore, it should have 90 dwelling units. So the point is...
Marco, that's beyond what we need to talk about right now. We are going to write a letter that is neither hooray or go away to HPD that just says that there are problems and issues and that they need to find ways to look out. Although I think your suggestion of having tenants filing complaints with HPD is not a bad one if they are in fact true. But I think that right now we're going to try and write a letter. And we seem to be in general agreement as a committee that we would like to write a letter. And I believe that between what Elizabeth and Valerie said about what that letter should contain, makes perfect sense. And we can go back to the tape and capture all of the language that was proposed by everyone. Great. Now, there is one piece of new business I would like to mention, and this was brought to my attention and the attention of the other chairs by one of the committee members, and that is that there is a proposal in committee to rewrite some of the definitions of family and of, let's see, it was family and occupancy. And it also snuck in, pardon apparent editorializing, a clause that would allow for Airbnb, which has been forbidden in the city, for Airbnb in certain districts, in particular 1 and 2 family houses. And so this is something that we only know a little bit about. It's still in committee, so we don't have to do anything right now, but it is something that we should put, I think, on our agenda for next month as a full topic that we will try and get some information and at least get comment on, because one of the big problems in the city has been Airbnb, where people have used their apartments and their homes as a way effectively to avoid long-term rentals, which has further reduced our housing stock. And it might be in only small ways, but in a sense, every little bit helps. So that was the issue that we wanted to bring up. And I think I don't think we really have to talk about it tonight, since it is now getting closer to 10 o'clock than to 9:30.
Oh.
And if someone would like to, so right now we have 2 letters to write. So if someone would like to make a suggestion. Peggy, I think. Wait a minute, yeah. Unmute her
Hi,
so she
thanks.
can.
Can I make a motion to adjourn?
Oh, I hope so. Yes.
I want to put in 1 cent first. And we didn't have the chance before, and if he's still here, I hope he is, to give everyone's thanks to George Janes for his superb presentation.
Yes. So.
And then we can adjourn.
And I want to can I just use my chair prerogative to thank all the members of the public that came out tonight and
yes,
attended our meeting.
Yes.
It's always better when the public comes.
Yes, indeed. All right. So unless there is someone who has completely lost their mind, we are adjourned. And we will see you next month. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.